Chapter 1686. Strike Kong Sect, Taoism, and Taisui Mountain were all under the Water Jade Palace's jurisdiction. They were under the protection of the Empress of Water Jade. If the Sacred Palace needed help, the three sects would also help. Any conflict between the three sects was a matter of the lower-level forces. No matter how much trouble they caused, the Sacred Palace would not interfere. As a mother, she had to be fair. Nye Sippo was now a member of the Sacred Palace. Giving Nye Rong a supreme-grade emperor artifact was not too much considering that she was from the Nye clan. However, if she directly attacked Taoism, the situation would become serious. The three sects were all children. Losing any one of them would weaken the Sacred Palace. Once the Empress punished her, Nye Sippo would not be able to escape punishment. Therefore, she could not go overboard. However, Qin Hao's three attacks showed that he wanted to kill. If Nye Sippo did not block the last attack, her brother would have died under Qin Hao's sword. How about you let it go? Qin Hao floated quietly. Block three of her attacks? His intention was to stand up for Nye Rong and not give up on Shi Dong's emperor's inheritance. Yes, he did want to get rid of great ancestor Strike Kong. Dinda treated people with respect. If Nye Rong spoke nicely like Nyeli, he did not plan to attack. However, the old bastard was too arrogant. He would not give up until he got the inheritance. In order to stabilize the Taoism's future, Qin Hao needed to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. If he killed great ancestor Strike Kong, who would dare to attack the Taoism in the South River region, only then could he leave the Taoism with peace of mind. However, that was not important. He could not avoid Nye Sippo's next three attacks. Why aren't you saying anything? Is the South River Tribulation, Sword Emperor, afraid? Weren't your three attacks very impressive? In Shiming's opinion, you're just bullying Senior Nye Rong because you have a higher cultivation level. The Tribulation Sword Emperor showed his true colors when he met Granny C. Shiming, who was beside the sedan, mocked. As Nye Sippo's servant, she naturally stood on the side of the Nye clan. This was also for her future in the Sacred Palace. Fairy Shiming, right? Your name is not bad, and your looks are not bad. It's just that your breath is too bad. Is it because of that your status in the Sacred Palace is lower than the other fairies? Qin Hao said coldly. Watch your mouth. She was a girl, after all. All right, 3 palm strikes it is. I will suppress the attack to the maximum range you can withstand. Either you take it, or let Niet Dong enter the Void Strike Mountain. I will give you half an incense stick's worth of time to consider, but not too long. I am very busy, and my time is very precious. I need to get back to the Holy Palace as soon as possible. Nye Sippo gave an ultimatum. If Qin Hao didn't accept it, Dao Sect would have the hand over Shi Dong. I don't need half an incense stick's worth of time. I can tell you now. 3 palm strikes, take it. Qin Hao said. He did not hesitate to receive the 300 palms. Chu-san, are you tired of living? Nye Sippo is an Emperor Dao expert. Chui Biqiu said in alarm. Don't be stubborn. Let little Dong attack the empty mountain first. Big Brother and I will immediately set off for the Holy Palace and beg the Emperor Lord for an explanation. Shi Yongnian's eyes were red. He leaned close to Qin Hao and whispered into his ear. They had personally experienced how strong Qin Hao's Sword Dao was. The Tribulation Sword Sovereign's Sword Dao was definitely invincible in the Emperor realm. But no matter how strong he was only half a step into the Emperor realm. A fake Emperor was a fake Emperor after all. Nye Sippo had truly mastered the Emperor realm. As long as she used a trace of her rule force, Qin Hao was far from being able to contend with her. Judging from the old woman's aura, 3 palm strikes were very likely to cripple Li Chuji. Nyeli, take Niedong back to the Void Strike Mountain. Since Dao Sect didn't dare to take it, Nye Sippo directly ordered the Void Strike Dao Emperor to capture Niedong. Nyeli took a step forward with a cold smile on his face. Previously, he had declared to the Tribulation Sword Sovereign that the Nye family was strong. Now, did he have a taste of it? Wait. Qin Hao also took a step forward and said to the proud son, Senior, make your move. Chu-san, you mustn't. Chui Biqiu was so shocked that his expression changed drastically. They were really going against Emperor Yuan. Suppress Chui Biqiu. Qin Hao's expression froze, and sword light burst out from his eyes. Seeing this, Shi Yongnian and Bo Shang dragged Cui Biqiu away. "Let go. I am the Dao sect master." Cui Biqiu struggled hard, but it was completely useless. At this moment, all the martial artists were moved. The South Sky Peak's Tribulation Sword Sovereign actually wanted to take 3 palm strikes from Nye Sippo with his Emperor Realm strength. He was really daring. The name of the Tribulation Sword Sovereign was very famous in Nanjiang City recently, but Nye Sippo was an Emperor Realm powerhouse. How could he withstand the disparity between an Emperor Realm and an Emperor Realm? Many people were worried about this and felt that it was a pity. There were also people who were secretly happy. They wanted to see the Tribulation Sword Sovereign get beaten up, and the Taisui Sovereign was one of them. As for Grand Ancestor Ji Kong, his nose was almost reaching the top of his head. It wasn't that he couldn't defeat Li Chuji, but that Li Chuji was too sinister and hid his cultivation too deeply. Grand Ancestor Ji Kong was suppressed by his realm. If they were in the same realm, the Tribulation Sword Sovereign would have died countless times in his hands. First palm strike. As soon as the voice fell, a figure suddenly flew out of the palanquin. As the black curtain fluttered, it was like a platinum light shadow. Its speed was incomparably fast. Light flowed in the palm, wrapping around Dilly and slamming heavily into Qin Hao's chest. Almost as soon as Nye Sippo appeared, she directly landed in front of Qin Hao. Everyone finally saw Nye Sippo's true appearance. She was about 30 years old, beautiful, mature, and had the nobility of a sacred palace woman on her face. She was completely different from what they had imagined. Qin Hao was also slightly stunned. He thought that Nye Sippo should be an old woman with a hunched back and a face full of wrinkles. He didn't expect her to take such good care of herself. She was even more beautiful than Shimeng and the other 3 girls. Her temperament was also incomparable. She is someone who has stepped into the Emperor Realm, after all. Qin Hao instantly regained his senses. Nye Sippo's cultivation was at the 3rd stage of the Yuan, the Arch Realm. When a martial artist entered the Arch Realm, they no longer relied too much on heaven and earth spirit energy. Instead, they relied on their Tao to nourish their body. Many Arch powerhouses, including the Arch Lords, looked the same as when they were young. As for Patriarch Striking Kong, his cultivation was still at the Emperor Realm. He still needed to be nourished by heaven and earth spirit energy to maintain his youthful appearance. This had a great impact on the cultivation of the human sovereign realm. Therefore, he couldn't bear to waste his energy on his appearance. The light of tribulation flashed, and a sword curtain appeared in front of him out of thin air. Even though he knew that Nye Sippo couldn't hurt him, Qin Hao still had to put on an act for outsiders to see. After all, he had to protect Qian Ming's nanny's face. Pa! As expected, the palm passed through, and the sword curtain shattered. With a loud bang, Nye Sippo's palm landed squarely on Qin Hao's chest. The platinum Dilly's palm wreaked havoc, and a majestic force penetrated his body, sending him flying. However, Nye Sippo was shocked to find that Qin Hao was as immovable as a mountain. It was as if her palm didn't hit a human body, but a 10,000-year-old rock. When the platinum Arch aura came into contact with the Tribulation Sword Sovereign's body, it directly collapsed. Even the bones in her hand felt a faint pain. He's actually so hard? Nye Sippo was obviously shocked, and so was Qin Hao. Since his rebirth, he had been cultivating the indestructible samsara art. His physical body surpassed that of ordinary people. Later, he became a demigod and was practically indestructible. Now, he had already dispersed the true qi in his body and stood there completely without any defense. Even so, Nye Sippo's attack was no different from scratching an itch. Even Qin Hao himself didn't expect that after 8 years of being tempered by the 5-spirit earth spirit energy of the South Sky Peak, his physical body would be strengthened to such an extent. This was the power of a flawless Arch. His Arch intent was flawless, his laws were flawless, and his Arch body didn't have any weaknesses. Even if he dispersed the true qi in his body and opened up his defense, Emperor Yuan's palm couldn't move him at all. Chapter 1687. The scene became weird. Everyone saw Nya Sippo suddenly fly out of the sedan and attack with her palm. Calamity, Sword Sovereign, took the attack with his chest straight. He was as steady as a mountain. Did Nya Sippo take this attack seriously? Why did it feel so weak? Especially after Qin Hao was slapped. He didn't move at all. Nya Sippo's hand was still on his chest. The two of them looked at each other with a dazed expression. No matter how one looked at it, it felt strange and ambiguous. Cough, cough. Thank you for showing mercy on the first attack. Qin Hao coughed. Your body is quite sturdy. Only then did Nya Sippo regain her senses. She took a few steps back and looked at Qin Hao with a serious expression. Of course, she didn't show mercy. Since she promised to restrain her power to his limit, she would definitely use all her strength. It would be best if she could knock him down in one hit. Although she didn't use any martial arts techniques, Nya Sippo thought that Qin Hao wouldn't be able to withstand her attack with just her Emperor Qi. However, she was shocked. Calamity, Sword Sovereign's physical body was so strong that it was beyond her imagination. How did he manage to break through her attack with his physical body? Whoosh! Below, Jean Bietchio and the other two stood in the training hall and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Nya Sippo was kind and didn't use too much strength. Her first attack was to test Chu San's condition so that she wouldn't kill him later. Nya Sippo was actually a good person. The elders and disciples also breathed a sigh of relief, especially Shi Dong and Yin Qingqing. If Nya Sippo really killed their master, they would definitely fight with their lives. Senior, please teach me the second attack. Qin Hao said. He was still very polite. After all, she was the nanny who raised Qianning. However, he was thinking about how to deal with it. He wanted to make himself look worse to show that Nya Sippo was powerful. If he could take the 3 attacks peacefully, Qianning's nanny wouldn't look too bad. Well, he might as well hurt himself. Nya Sippo was a 3rd stage Dao attainment stage, 3rd stage Dao attainment stage. Based on her cultivation, it would be difficult for her to injure Qin Hao if she didn't unleash her full power. Even if Qin Hao didn't resist, it would be difficult for her to attack him. On the other hand, Qin Hao was more worried that Nya Sippo would suffer from internal injuries. Qin Hao would only be affected if his opponent used his Emperor's Will Law to its fullest extent. However, as a senior figure, he would not act so viciously against a junior Renwan. Empty palm, shouted Nya Sippo. Above her mature body, dazzling imperial light flowed. Strands of terrifying platinum qi gathered in her palm. Instantly, the space rumbled. Borrowing the power of the great path, her palm qi resonated with the heavens and earth. This palm contained the power of a martial skill. They're getting serious. That's good. Qin Hao smiled in his heart. The stronger Nya Sippo's palm strike, the easier it would be for him to pretend to be injured. As the saying goes, pretending to be an expert is easy, but pretending to be a weakling is simply too difficult. Wong. There was a terrifying rumble in the void. Nya Sippo thought that Qin Hao was mocking her. She raised her palm and increased the strength of her palm strike by 30%. Dense illusory images of women appeared in the space. Just like great ancestor Qigong's empty palm, the illusory images surrounded Nya Sippo as if they were worshipping her. However, the difference was that Nya Sippo's might was stronger. The void was filled with illusory images of women. The scale was extremely large, no less than tens of thousands. Great ancestor Qigong could not compare at all. Moreover, she didn't need to gather the palm energy of all the illusory images. She directly struck forward. The tens of thousands of illusory images of women in the space also followed Nya Sippo's action and struck toward Qin Hao. Rumble. The void seemed to be collapsing. There was no trace of palm radiance, but the space was shattering bit by bit. The dense spiderweb was like lightning and instantly swallowed Qin Hao. There was a terrifying explosion in the space. Qin Hao exclaimed in his heart. At the same time, he pretended to resist and increased the sword Dao Gang Qi around him. On the other hand, his sea of Qi was flowing in reverse. In the blink of an eye, his primordial Qi was flowing in reverse. It hit his meridians 5 times before he forced out a mouthful of blood. His body was like a kite with a broken string. With a terrifying explosion, he flew out and crashed into the Taoist temple. The Taoist temple was turned into ruins. What a terrifying palm strike. The Taisui emperor widened his eyes. Even someone as strong as Li Chuji couldn't withstand a single blow. Niesipo was indeed an emperor realm expert. He relied on his higher cultivation level to barely defeat the old man. It was an unfair victory. Great ancestor Qikong said proudly. He didn't forget to teach the Qikong Taoist emperor, Nyeli. Did you see it clearly? This is the true essence of our Nye clan's empty palm strike. No so-called genius in the same cultivation level can withstand it. In Nyerong's eyes, Niesipo's palm strike was at most at the level of a fake emperor. She was at the same cultivation level as Li Chuji. However, Li Chuji was beaten to a pulp. Master, Junior 3, Jean Biechio, Sherdong, and the others watched as Qin Hao was crushed by the palm strike. The Taoist hall was reduced to ruins and the Taoist peak was shaken. They couldn't help but be shocked. The power of the palm strike was so great that it was obviously beyond the limit of what Qin Hao could withstand. In an instant, everyone in the Taoist sect rushed toward the Taoist hall. Even if Tribulation Sword Sovereign was defeated, they should at least save him immediately. Bang! Just as the Taoist sect's people lifted their feet, a figure flashing with sword light broke through the sky from the ruins of the Taoist hall. It was extremely fast and returned to everyone's sight, standing in front of Niesipo. The second palm strike. Thank you for showing mercy. Qin Hao pretended to cough. As he coughed, he covered his heart with his palm. Dilly kept attacking his meridians in his palm. He coughed out mouthful after mouthful of blood. He looked extremely miserable. Master, Sherdong's eyes were filled with tears. In order to protect him, the sect leader, his fellow disciples, the elders, and his master had sacrificed so much. Master, don't hold on anymore. I don't want to see you die. In Qingqing cried. The moment Li Chuji transformed into Tribulation Sword Sovereign, she felt that her master was extremely powerful. However, looking at him now, he was so weak and powerless. Old Lady Nya was too ruthless. I can still continue. The third palm strike. Senior, please teach me. Qin Hao coughed for a while and barely recovered. However, the qi around him was extremely chaotic. He looked at Niesipo with a pale face. Your bones are really tough. Shiming squeezed through her teeth. He could still crawl back after being injured like this. Nierong was defeated by you. His reputation in this life was not in vain. Although you haven't entered the martial emperor realm, your sword intent is as tough as steel. Your body and bloodline are extremely dense. Even those who have just entered the martial emperor realm may not be stronger than you. Niesipo took a deep breath and said, It seems that I have underestimated you again. You are now able to withstand 49 martial emperor tribulations. What? Emperor Taisui was shocked. According to Niesipo's words, Li Chuji was strong enough to become a martial emperor. However, his cultivation was still lacking. Once he attracted the martial emperor tribulations, even the martial emperor tribulations would not be able to do anything to him. This was an expert who would become a martial emperor. Emperor Taisui's expression suddenly changed. There were many human sovereigns in the 4 regions of the divine wilderness, but there were very few who would become martial emperors. And Li Chuji's future was to become a martial emperor. Maybe I should reconsider. Li Chuji might be able to tie with me in the same realm. Ancestor Jikong's expression also became serious. Nieli's heart trembled as he looked at the Nye family's ancestor. Was he serious? Tribulation Sword Sovereign, it's not easy for you to cultivate the Sword Tao. The martial emperors of the Sacred Palace have already noticed you. If you are willing to hand over Sherdong and return with me, you will definitely be a martial emperor of the Sacred Palace. Why do you have to do this? Niesipo suddenly cherished talent, but then she shook her head and sneered. Even if she did not want to fight, Tribulation Sword Sovereign might not appreciate it. Senior, please teach me the third palm. As expected, Qin Hao's attitude was as firm as before. For the Taoist sect, he would not retreat. At this moment, all the martial artists were in awe. They all looked at Tribulation's sword sovereign with solemn expressions. Even Nye Sippo admitted that Li Chuji would definitely become a martial emperor. However, for the Taoist sect, he was willing to take another palm. Everyone knew that Nye Sippo would not let Tribulation Sword Sovereign stand up for the third palm. It was equivalent to destroying his foundation and breaking his martial emperor path. Master, Sherdong faced the sky and knelt down. Chapter 1688. Creak. Jean Bietchio clenched his fists, and his soul trembled. For the Tao sect, he was willing to cut off the imperial Tao. What kind of breadth of mind was this? Not to mention others. Even if it was the 3 sect masters of the Tao sect, would they be able to do what Qin Hao did? Maybe they could, but they definitely wouldn't be so decisive and give up the imperial Tao sect without hesitation. Third day of the Lunar New Year. Have you ever thought that after this palm strike, even the herbs in the medicinal garden will cry because no master will be able to take care of them like you do in the future? Perhaps it was his old illness acting up again, but Elder, you suddenly sat down on the ground and cried bitterly, spitting out inauspicious words. No one tried to persuade him. The entire Tao sect mourned. The disciples might have the same thoughts as Old Man Yu. After the third palm strike, the Tao sect would no longer have Li Chuji. Just like the name of the Tribulation Sword Sovereign, he came and went quickly. You have to think carefully. If you use the third palm strike, I won't go easy on you. Nye Sippo said coldly. Next, she would use the power of rules because Li Chuji's physique was so strong that it wasn't inferior to Emperor Yuan's. If I don't enter hell, who will? Qin Hao raised his head and looked at the sky, exuding a heroic spirit. Then, he lowered his head and shouted at Yin Qingqing. Qingqing, take good care of your junior brother. Why do you always say this? Don't leave everything to me. I want you to live safely and take care of the two of us. Yin Qingqing raised her head, her throat choked. For 8 years, the words take care of your junior brother had been imprinted in her mind. It was like brainwashing. Her master had said it countless times, but today, Yin Qingqing felt unprecedented fear. Buzz. The space trembled. A majestic and unparalleled power radiated out boundlessly. It was as if an emperor was looking down on the common people. All the cultivators who were enveloped by this power felt as if they had become ants under the heavenly Tao. At this time, platinum light surged and bloomed from Nye Sippo's body. It was extremely dazzling, revealing the true body of the Empress. Suffocating true meaning of the great Tao filled the air. Her majesty was unparalleled, as if a god had descended. Empty space. The platinum palm pierced through the void and whizzed towards Qin Hao. The terrifying power of the rules eroded everything and burned everything. The Void Shaker Law was formed from the Nye clan's Void Strike bloodline. When one was struck by the law of the Void Shaker Law, the body, soul, and even Tao inside of a cultivator would be completely devoured and transformed into nothingness as if they'd never appeared in the world. Qin Hao watched as the power of the nomological palm pressed down on him. His entire body was engulfed by the platinum brilliance. At that moment, his imperial body instinctively resisted. The platinum luster on the surface of his body flickered. Majestic Imperial Will wanted to penetrate his body and devour the person who attacked him. However, he immediately suppressed it. First of all, Nye Sippo was Qian Ning's nanny. He could not hurt her. In addition, Qin Hao also wanted to verify whether his physical body could directly contend with the rule force of other emperors without using the rule force. According to the direction of martial arts cultivated by the Divine Palace's Migres Hall, the flawless Empyrean body he forged shouldn't have any blind spots. Strength of the same level shouldn't be able to break through it, unless it was a higher-level Divine Tao law. What's more, Nye Sippo's Tao confirming power was actually weaker than Qin Hao by more than one level. She shouldn't be in any danger. Boom. Crack. Everyone watched as Li Chuji was engulfed by the platinum brilliance. A huge black hole with a radius of 100 meters appeared where he was standing. It was pitch black and deep, as though it was connected to another layer of space, a world that didn't belong to the divine wilderness continent. This was the first time the martialists of Nanjiang City witnessed the Emperor's true power. It was so terrifying. At that moment, the Taisui Emperor was trembling violently. It was as though his body was about to shatter. Plop! Yin Qingqing fainted on the spot when she saw the doomsday-like scene. What kind of power was this? How could her master survive? Rest in peace. In your next life, don't enter my Dao sect again. Xie Bieqiu swung his robe and knelt on the ground. Calamity, sending sword sovereign. Calamity, sending sword sovereign. Shi Yongnian and Bo Shang chanted solemnly. Everyone from the Dao sect faced the huge black hole in the void and knelt down together. Shi Dong clenched his fists so hard that blood flowed through the gaps between his fingers. His eyes were filled with endless killing intent as he looked at Nye Sippo. Haha, a mere fake emperor is nothing much. Fairy Shiming sneered, completely forgetting that she was only a lower-level Yuan venerate and was still very far from the human ruler. Is it finally over? Shi Jinhua, who was on the training ground below, looked up and suddenly felt very empty. In the past, he had always disliked Qin Hao and wished that this person would get out of the Dao Mountain as soon as possible. However, when this day finally came, his heart felt very heavy for some reason. Li Chuji had only been on the Dao Mountain for 8 years, yet he had still been able to achieve this. Shi Jinhua had been born on the Dao Mountain since he was a child, but what had he done for the Dao sect? Perhaps none of the future disciples would think of him as a hero. On the contrary, even though Li Chuji had died, the next few generations of the Dao sect would never forget his battle. Hero. The calamity sending sword sovereign was fully deserving of this title. Shi Jinhua was rooted to the spot. His heart was at a loss. He might have really been wrong. High up in the sky, the huge black hole gradually closed. The shattered space was gradually repaired by the suppression of the sky path. However, just as Nye Sippo was about to order Nelly to bring everyone away for the second time, a tall figure gradually appeared in the slowly disappearing black hole. Everyone's hearts trembled violently as they stared at the figure in disbelief. Qin Hao's appearance was very ugly. His hair was messy, and his clothes were severely damaged. This time, he wasn't pretending. He was more or less affected by Emperor Yuan's rules, but the effect wasn't great. There were only traces of dark red scratches on the surface of his body, and his flesh wasn't damaged. As expected, Nye Sippo's rules weren't enough to break through the flawless body of an Empyrean. If Hui Tong was here, he might not even be able to break through the golden light. Of course, all of this was because Qin Hao didn't put up any defense. Impossible. There's actually such a thing? Nye Sippo was so shocked that her expression finally changed. Looking at the rule power that was gradually dissipating in her palm, she didn't show any mercy. But the Tribulation Sword Sovereign still managed to hold on. Master, master! Shi Dong stepped on the sky with the water wind steps and flew towards Qin Hao like an arrow, sprinkling sparkling tears along the way. Third day, Elder. Everyone was shocked. Elder, you stopped crying and stared blankly at the sky. I can't believe it. Shi Yongnian rubbed his eyes fiercely with both hands. Beside him, Bo Shang suddenly roared excitedly. The Tribulation Sword Sovereign is mighty. The Tribulation Sword Sovereign is mighty. The Tribulation Sword Sovereign is mighty. In an instant, these cheers were like waves, boiling over one wave after another. Not only the mountain of Dao, but the martial artists of Nanjiang City who were watching the battle from afar, and even the people from Taisui Mountain and the airstrike sect couldn't help but shout out. It was too shocking. If Li Chuji was also Emperor Yuan, no matter what the outcome of this battle was, everyone wouldn't be too surprised. After all, they were on the same level. However, he was only the human sovereign. A human sovereign withstood the Empyrean rules and didn't die. How shocking and determined was that? Impossible? This is absolutely impossible. No matter how strong a martial artist's physical body is, even if they have the qualifications to survive the 49th stage of the Empyrean Tribulation, They will never be able to stand up after falling into my rule power. There's a trap, there's a trap. Niesipo mumbled incoherently. The way she looked at Qin Hao changed. Faintly, it was filled with horror. No one in the world could directly contend with the Empyrean rules before breaking through to the Empyrean realm. This was an unchanging law since ancient times. No matter how heaven-defying a genius was, it was impossible to be so heaven-defying. Senior, thank you for showing mercy. This junior will remember this kindness in my heart. I will definitely go to the sacred palace to thank you another day. After the 3 palms, Qin Hao cupped his hands and bowed to Niesipo. He still didn't forget his etiquette. Withstand my Empyrean rules. I don't believe that you are a mere human sovereign. Get out of your true body and let me see what kind of monster you are. A fierce and ear-piercing roar shook the world. Niesipo was like a crazy woman who had lost her composure. The rules in her palms condensed again, and the platinum light around her body shone brightly. As she raised her hand, palm shadows filled the sky and pierced through the void. Fierce attacks bombarded forward like a torrential rain. How could a human sovereign bear the Empyrean rules? There's a trap, there's a trap. She was deceived. However, Shi Dong was using the wind steps and was rushing over. His speed was extremely fast, and in an instant, he was sucked in by Niesipo's chaotic attacks. Chapter 1689. Countless pairs of eyes stared at the sky in shock. Many martial artists cried out in shock. The 3 palms had already passed. Niesipo should have stopped and left, but she didn't. Instead, she became even fiercer and her attacks became even more ferocious. In just an instant, she didn't just throw out 3 palms. Instead, she threw out hundreds of palms. The airflow in the sky became chaotic. The space continued to shatter. Under the corrosion of Niesipo's rule power, the palms pierced through the void. The void seemed to be peeled off layer by layer, revealing the darkness below. Anything that was affected by the rule power was turned into nothingness. The sky was filled with the rule power. In an instant, Qin Hao and Shi Dong were drowned. Jibi Qiu, Shi Yongnian, and Bo Shang couldn't help but scream in fear. Not good. Qin Hao saw that Shi Dong was in the middle of the rule power bombardment. Water Wind God stepped into the sky and stood in front of Shi Dong. His outstanding height gave his disciple a great sense of security. He supported himself with one hand, and the sword intent in his body roared. Strands of platinum sword chi intertwined into a shield, turning into a pale platinum sword shield that blocked the rain of palms. No wonder, Sword Emperor. Niesipo was so angry that she laughed. Those 3 palms had made her question her own cultivation. It turned out that she had been wrong. She didn't see through Li Chuji's real body. This person wasn't a human sovereign, but a sword emperor. Senior Nya, you've gone too far. Qin Hao's face turned cold. It didn't matter what she did to him. Shi Dong was a cultivator of the Saint Realm. How could he accept the emperor's rule power? However, Niesipo didn't care about the life and death of her junior and still attacked without hesitation. Master, don't be nervous. She can't hurt me. Qin Hao said. He tolerated it, but it didn't mean that he didn't have a temper. On the contrary, Dinda's temper had always been extreme. Originally, he wanted to settle the matter peacefully. However, it only increased Niesipo's arrogance. Until now, Qin Hao finally understood that the Calamity Sword Emperor alone couldn't suppress today's incident. It seemed that his second identity couldn't be hidden anymore. Shi Dong didn't say anything else. He sensed that his master's temperament had changed. His master's aura was getting stronger and stronger. He was afraid that he would affect the other party. This is the first time in my life that I, Niesipo, have been played by someone without knowing it. Your Excellency's means of deceiving everyone is brilliant. Since that's the case, let's fight. Let me see how many layers of Emperor's Tao you have attained. Niesipo's Monarch light shone again. She took a deep breath and launched another few hundred attacks with her palms. Qin Hao's shield started to crack. At this point, he still wanted to save some face for Qianning. However, Qianning did not give up. Her nomological attacks not only enveloped the master and disciple duo, but also seemed to radiate towards the Tao Mountain. Within the Tao Mountain were the weak and helpless disciples of the Tao sect. Nye Sippo, if you don't stop, don't blame me for being merciless. Qin Hao warned sternly. It's better if you are merciless. An emperor should be merciless. Throw away your calamity, sword emperor appearance, and let me see what kind of extraordinary person you are. How dare you come to the water jade, holy kingdom, and play tricks? Come, unleash your emperor's Tao. Don't hold back against me. The originally dignified and graceful lady had lost all her poise. Nye Sippo looked at the people of the Tao Mountain with a vicious gaze. Suddenly, her palms changed. Her nomological palms rained down like torrential rain. She wanted to see if Li Chuji would reveal his true identity. Run! The overwhelming palms rained down. The power of the nomological rules tore through the void. It was like the end of the world. Jiubiqiu was shocked. He, Shi Yongnian, and Bo Shang tried their best to get the disciples out of the mountain. However, how could the three lower Renhuangs be faster than an emperor? Under the cover of the emperor's will, their words and actions were law. With a thought, Nye Sippo sealed the entire Tao Mountain. It was impossible for the Tao sect to escape. Boom! An extremely violent flame, Tao might, was released. The fire spread rapidly and covered the entire sky. The sky above the martialists of Nanjiang City turned into a terrifying pool of blood in an instant. In the boundless void, blazing demonic flames surged. Under the cover of the red lotus Tao might, the emperor's nomological rules did not exist. The palms raining down on the Tao Mountain dissipated. As the demonic flames burned, an even more majestic emperor's will descended. Even the noble emperor's aura that Nye Sippo emitted was suppressed and destroyed. The martialists who were watching the battle in the void fell in batches. First, it was the sky origin ancestors, saints, monarchs, and finally, Shimeng and the other three who were carrying the palanquin. Even Yuan venerates couldn't stand in the air. They were all forced to the ground. It wasn't a deliberate attack. The flame Tao might that shrouded the void was too strong. It was so strong that the human sovereigns, Emperor Tai Sui, Emperor Striking Kong, and Patriarch Striking Kong, could only tremble in fear. At the moment, Nye Sippo's eyes were only filled with shock and fear. In front of her, an even more resplendent emperor's brilliance bathed Li Chuji's body. His tall figure appeared even more imposing amid the brilliance. It was as if a great emperor powerhouse had descended and could devour the sun and moon. The faint luster of dragon scales flickered through Qin Hao's tattered clothes. His originally pitch-black hair was gradually covered in a layer of silver light. When the emperor's wings unfolded behind him and the 12 demonic feathers flapped, he was like a living demon god standing in the void, overlooking the entire Shui Yao nation and the entire south border of the East Continent. Kneel! A faint voice came from his mouth as he looked down at Nye Sippo with his emotionless and cold eyes. As Qin Hao spoke, the dignified lady of the sacred palace, whose legs trembled as she knelt before Qin Hao's feet, she did not even dare to raise her head. Nye Sippo's beautiful face was filled with humiliation. Tears kept flowing from her eyes. It was not that she wanted to kneel, but Qin Hao's emperor's will had invaded her divine soul. The tyrannical pressure that was comparable to an imperial lord's had ruthlessly crushed her will. The power hit her soul again and again, and she was completely unable to control her body. She wanted to see Qin Hao's real body. Now, she had gotten her wish. However, when she stripped away the tribulation sword sovereign's outer appearance, she welcomed an unparalleled demon god that was comparable to an imperial lord. In the past, Dinda was a figure who had intimidated the 4 regions and 8 wastelands. He was regarded as the ruler of the East Continent by the 5 worlds. His aura was even stronger than that of the Shui Yao Empress. In the face of such a mighty figure, Nye Sippo was as weak as a lamb and could only tremble. Not only her. The 2 words calmly spread out from the sky. The people within 1,000 miles of Tao Mountain and even the 15 counties of Nanjiang all knelt on the ground. The Tai Sui Emperor, The striking Tao Emperor and the striking Ancestor were like three giant toads. They simply prostrated themselves on the ground and did not dare to move. It's okay. Calm down. Nies Sippo has already knelt. I'm just a little human sovereign. Li Chuji won't pay attention to an ant-like existence like me. At this moment, the Tai Sui Emperor kept comforting himself. He was trying to soothe his overly frightened heart that almost stopped beating. It was too shocking. Who would have thought that Li Chuji, who was planting grass in the outer court of Taoism, was actually an imperial lord that was comparable to the current master of the Shui Yao Sacred Palace, the supreme female emperor? Zhang Bieqiu, Shi Yongnian, and Bo Shang were also so shocked that they could not breathe. The change was too sudden. Before they could escape from Dao Mountain with their disciples, two words fell from the sky. They knelt down without hesitation. However, when they looked up again, they found that Nies Sippo had knelt down at the feet of someone else. And that person was actually Li Chuji, Tribulation's sword sovereign. No, perhaps they should change their title and call him Tribulation Sword Sovereign. The space was so quiet that even the falling leaves could be heard. Nearly 1 million people did not even dare to fart, let alone breathe. Even if they had a fart, it was forcibly held in their intestines. The only sound that could be heard was a woman sobbing. It was the sound of Nies Sippo's extremely humiliating tears. Chapter 1690. In the Water Jade Holy Empire, women's rights prevailed, and in ordinary households, women's status was higher than men. Nies Sippo was the Sippo of the Sacred Palace and the nanny of Saintess Qianning. How did she feel when she knelt before a white-haired man? But who could she blame? She asked for it. If she hadn't been so aggressive, she wouldn't have lost her dignity. Her kneeling was even more humiliating than ancestral patriarch Strike Kong's defeat. Are you satisfied now? Qin Hao looked down at her. Platinum wool of the great path flowed around his body. The innate temperament of an emperor was proud and aloof. It was as if even the heavens were about to fall under his feet. Nies Sippo lowered her head and cried. She didn't say anything else. What else could she say? She wanted to see how many levels of Dao Li Chuji had proven. She didn't need to. She could see the number of halos under Qin Hao's feet. There were 7 emperor halos, which represented the 7th level of Dao proving. Vaguely, there was a blurry figure forming at the outermost layer. It wouldn't take long for him to break through to the 8th level of Dao proving. He was infinitely close to Empress Shui Yao's cultivation. Nies Sippo was only at the 3rd level of Dao proving. What right did she have to talk to him? You made Nies Sippo kneel and humiliated the people of the Sacred Palace. Don't be so lawless just because you have a higher level. The Sacred Palace has more. Before Fairy Shimen could finish her words, slap! Qin Hao sent a palm strike whistling through the air, causing Precious Dream's body to spin 360 degrees in the air before crashing heavily into the ground. When she raised her head again, a bright red handprint had appeared on the left side of her face, and it was as striking as a birthmark. I ignored you not because I'm afraid, but because you don't even have the right to be looked at. What can the Sacred Palace do? Come, shout louder. Call your number 1 holy maiden Qianning over. Call all the elders over. It would be best if even Empress Shui Yao came. Please, shout as loud as you want. Gods and Buddhas all over the sky come. I, Li Chu-san, will say that if you frown in the slightest, my head will be twisted off for you to kick. Qin Hao shouted. His voice shook the heavens. Mad? When Dindi of the East Continent was angry, even Mad God had to admit defeat. You're just a mere servant girl. When facing someone stronger than you, it's best if you know how to show respect. That way, you can live longer. After Qin Hao finished speaking, he no longer looked at Shimen Meng. Dinda had never said that he would never hit a woman. After 2 lifetimes of recultivation, Dinda had killed all kinds of people. Those that he had beaten were those that deserved to be beaten, and those that he had killed were those that deserved to be killed. He did not mind crushing a disgusting fly to death. Shimen was prostrated on the ground, her head buried deep in the ground. The blood-red handprint on her face was incomparably glaring, and her entire body was trembling. She had long since forgotten the meaning of respect and reverence, having originated from the sacred palace. But today, Qin Hao's glance made her realize what she was. What kind of hero are you to bully a weak fairy from my holy palace? Don't go too far. Nie Sippo lay in the void, her jade-like hands clenching tighter and tighter. However, the will of the way above her head did not allow her to get up. Are you even qualified to say that I'm going too far? Qin Hao sneered and casually waved his hand, dispersing the emperor's might that was suppressing Nie Sippo. Forget it, get lost. For the sake of Qining, I won't kill you today, but I will not let this matter rest. Go back and pass a message to Qining. Tell her to personally come over and apologize to me sincerely. Otherwise, once I step into the gates of the sacred palace, it won't be as simple as an apology. Get lost. Buzz. The blood-red color that swept across the sky quickly faded, and the emperor's Dao might that was suppressing the Nanjiang heavens dissipated into nothingness. It was only at this moment that the millions of cultivators lying on the ground dared to breathe. They were like a group of suffocating beggars, opening their big mouths and greedily inhaling the sweet air. A large palanquin that was suffused with a platinum radiance crazily shuttled through the void and left in the direction of the sacred palace. The scene was completely different from when they first arrived. Nie Sippo left with the 4 fairies in a sorry state, as if she was running for her life. Qilin Dao sect, you colluded with Emperor Yuan from the outside world and disturbed the rule of the Holy Empire. Prepare to receive the punishment of the Emperor Lord. A voice resounded from the distant void. If the sacred palace thinks so, then so be it. My Dao sect will accept the challenge. Ji Biechio gathered his sovereign chi, clenched his fists, and directly shouted back. As soon as he shouted this sentence, Ji Biechio's soul trembled. Lingering fear emerged in his heart. What did he say just now? Accept the challenge of the sacred palace? It seems that he has also gone crazy. But it felt really good when he shouted. In the silent space, no one dared to make any sound. Only Ji Biechio's roar reverberated. The millions of cultivators at the foot of the mountain heard it in their hearts. Declaring war on the sacred palace? Even if Ji Biechio died, his life would be worth it. Disperse. Qin Hao glanced at the foot of the mountain. There were so many people. His identity as Emperor Yuan was exposed today. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse for the Dao sect. However, it shouldn't be a big problem. Even if there was a problem, Qining would have erased all traces in advance. After all, the Water Jade Holy Empire was still under the control of the sacred palace. We will take our leave. The huge crowd of cultivators bowed to the void and quickly left the Dao Mountain. In fact, they really wanted to pay their respects to Li Chuji's imperial demeanor, but Ji Biechio's roar was too serious. The Dao Mountain was facing the sacred palace's crusade at any time. It was better to leave as soon as possible. Among them, 2 relatively large forces were particularly conspicuous, so much so that it was difficult for Qin Hao to not notice them. Did I say that I would let the 3 of you go? As Qin Hao's voice fell calmly, the Tai Sui Emperor, striking Kong Dao Emperor, and Old Ancestor striking Kong immediately turned around and laid down in midair again. Senior, I didn't do anything. Everything has nothing to do with me, the Tai Sui Emperor said. The Tai Sui Emperor said. Li Chu-san was still thinking about him, even in this situation. Li Chu-san was too vengeful. Senior, I'm old and dim-sighted. I didn't know that Di Zun had arrived in Nanjiang City and did something foolish today. Please spare my lowly life for the sake of my younger sister, Nie Sippo. Old Ancestor striking Kong knelt down and cried. Next to him, striking Kong Dao Emperor, Nieli didn't dare to say a word at all. Now, he finally understood the gap between the Old Ancestor and Li Chuji. Evenly matched? Slightly better? The Old Ancestor really had the face to say that. They were simply worlds apart. Okay? From today onwards, I will preach on the Dao Mountain. I don't want to see the disciples of the Dao Mountain suffer any disturbance. Do you all understand? Qin Hao said. Understood, understood. The 3 nodded obediently. The Tai Sui Emperor said, from now on, There will be no more Tai Sui Mountain in Nanjiang. I will move away. Same. The striking Kong sect should have ceased to exist long ago. I'm too tired to be burdened by Nieli, this unfilial descendant. I will go back and disband the striking Kong sect. Old ancestor Striking Kong said. Nieli stared at him, but there was nothing wrong with it. Since the Tao Mountain had an emperor preaching, its status was different from before. From now on, the Qilan Dao sect would become a first-rate force. Moreover, with Li Chuji's tyrannical cultivation, he would definitely promote the Dao sect to become a top first-rate force, second only to the Sacred Palace. According to the past rules, once a sect in a certain region was promoted to a first-rate force, the other second-rate forces would merge with it. While expanding the scale, it would also make it easier for the Sacred Palace to rule. The Tai Sui Emperor was already thankful that Li Chuji didn't make the three of them elders of the Dao sect. Chapter 1691. The battle for the inheritance was over. Li Chuji transformed into the Tribulation Sword Emperor and crushed the great ancestor Li Kong. After that, Nie Sippo of the Sacred Palace personally came to the Mountain of the Way. She still couldn't stand the power of the Tribulation Sword Emperor and knelt before him. Qin Hao guarded the world with his own strength and protected the Taoist orthodoxy that had lasted for thousands of years. From that day on, Li Chuji's name was like the sun in the sky in Nanjiang. The aristocratic families of the 15 counties of Nanjiang, the officials, and even countless heroes from farther places rushed to the Mountain of the Way with their children. They wanted to join the Taoist sect to cultivate. The Sword Emperor taught the way at the Mountain of the Way. Its status naturally rose along with Qin Hao's. Who wouldn't want to join the Mountain of the Way? At present, Nanjiang City was overcrowded. There were countless martial artists seeking the way, but they didn't enter the Mountain of the Way directly. Instead, they stayed in the city and waited for the situation to improve before deciding to send their children to join the Taoist sect. The Tribulation Sword Emperor was too strong and ignored the authority of the Sacred Palace. The higher-ups would definitely send someone to deal with him. In fact, everyone knew that the Sacred Palace couldn't use force to negotiate. After all, Li Chuji's cultivation was at the 7th level of the imperial path. Using force wouldn't benefit either side. But there was a process to this. The Qilan Mountain, after the twists and turns, the Taoist sect regained its peace. Like before, the disciples returned to the outer sect to cultivate, discuss martial arts, and live. Days passed. It was ordinary and quiet, as if nothing had happened. But there was something different. The herb garden had become the most sacred place in the hearts of the disciples. Now its status was even higher than the main peak. No one dared to overstep their boundaries. They only felt respect and endless gratitude, because the Tribulation Sword Emperor was in the herb garden. Qin Hao and his disciples lived peacefully. Unless the Sword Emperor summoned them, no one in the Taoist sect dared to disturb them, including the 3 sect leaders. At this moment, in the sky above the herb garden, endless light fell. A majestic Emperor, Qi, surged in the light. The sword will of the great path was everywhere. Qin Hao sat in the air with his eyes closed. His silver hair fluttered in the wind. Strands of light of the great path continued to cleanse his body. The sword will in his body grew stronger and stronger. The entire Qilan mountain range emitted terrifying sword hums. It was extremely solemn and dignified. The elders, deacons, and disciples of the Taoist palaces, the Sword Valley, the Spiritual Tower, the Martial Pavilion, and the Weapon Workshop all looked over at the silver-haired Sword Emperor who was sitting in the air. Their eyes were filled with passion and respect. The Sword Emperor is about to break through to the 8th stage of Tao confirming. His will of Run Huang wandered around the edge of the herb garden, feeling the power of the imperial swordsmanship. After today, the Calamity Sword Emperor was only 1 level away from the Emperor realm. Although I can't understand what kind of halo our ancestors were bathed in when the Tao sect was at its peak, I think that it's not much different from our current feelings. Shi Yongnian clasped his hands behind his back and looked at Qin Hao with a sincere gaze. He also cultivated in the way of the sword and could feel the vastness and terror of the sword will in the herb garden. I'm just afraid that he won't stay here for long. Bo Shang let out a long breath. The appearance of Li Chuji had brought the Tao sect's supreme glory and made everyone faintly feel like they had gone back in time to the strongest era of the Tao sect. However, how long could this glory last? The South Sky Peak flew to the Calamity Sword Emperor out of nowhere and took the peak for himself. However, he changed his name to Li Chuji and quietly watched over the herb garden for the Tao sect. There must be a reason. Zhan Bieqiu, Shi Yongnian, and Bo Shang didn't ask. They could feel that Qin Hao had some connection with the Tao sect. At the same time, they knew that he couldn't stay on the Tao mountain forever. Perhaps he would suddenly disappear one day, just like when the Calamity Sword Emperor appeared. If that day really came, they wouldn't ask him to stay. They would only wish him well. They hoped that the name of the Calamity Sword Emperor would fly higher and higher until it spread throughout the 5 realms of the East Continent. The Tao sect would always remember that there was once an elder in the herb garden named Li Chuji. Buzz, an incomparably intense brilliance, fell from a void. It was as bright as a pillar and enveloped Qin Hao's imperial body. At this moment, the blood in his body surged and the will of the Tao roared. The surging and terrible demonic flames spread out again and covered the herb garden. Huge flaming meteorites roared and revolved around him. Along with this, the towering southern heaven giant peak in the distance also let out a loud roar. It seemed to have become shorter invisibly. The giant peak sank, and the spiritual qi that covered the sky and earth surged, all of it entering the sea of fire in the herb garden. In an instant, Qin Hao's spiritual soul grew stronger, and the emperor's will and rules that he exuded surged. Below his body, the 7 Fists Emperor's path halos flashed with an extreme platinum luster. A dragon's roar resounded through the heavens and earth, and the 8th Emperor's ring appeared. It grew stronger and stronger until it solidified and resonated with the other 7. The 8th tier of the Tao realm. It was done. Congratulations, Master. Congratulations, Sword Emperor. Congratulations, Sword Emperor. In the herb garden, Shi Dong and Yin Qingqing's blood boiled. In the various dojos of the Tao Mountain, all the elders were excited. It was an honor to witness the emperor's path. Phew! Qin Hao exhaled a wisp of white air and smiled. Then he dispersed the will of the Tao. The flames in the void and the sword's roar disappeared at the same time. Everything on the Tao Mountain returned to normal. In 8 years, he had gone from the 4th stage to the 8th stage of the path validation realm. Perhaps to ordinary people, this speed was terrifying, but to Qin Hao, these 8 years have been extremely difficult. Looking at the Tao Palace, Qin Hao slowly said, Chu Bieqiu, Shi Yongnian, Bo Shang, Elder Yu, and Elder Qi, come here. It had been 8 years. They had watched Shi Dong grow up, and his bloodline revert to its ancestor. Moreover, he had gained the Emperor's path and the undead law. As long as there were no accidents, this child will be able to support the Tao Mountain in the future and lead the Qilin Tao sect to great heights. Therefore, it was time for Qin Hao to leave. His task of guarding the Tao sect had been completed, and his eldest senior brother's wish had been fulfilled. As for the future of the Tao sect, that was Shi Dong's responsibility. He couldn't guard it forever. Greetings, Sword Emperor. Inside the herb garden, Qin Hao sat on the ground with Shi Dong and Yin Qingqing beside him. At this moment, Chu Bieqiu and the others arrived and bowed. There's no need to be so formal. Just find a place to sit, Qin Hao said. As usual, he didn't put on any airs. Everyone smiled. Li Chuji was still Li Chuji. However, it was impossible for them to not be formal. After all, in front of them was an 8th stage Sword Emperor. Sword Emperor, why did you summon us? No one dared to sit in front of Qin Hao. Chu Bieqiu took half a step forward and asked in a low voice. The others also looked very nervous. They faintly guessed that the Sword Emperor might be leaving. Qin Hao glanced at everyone. Seeing their nervous expressions, he thought of his 8 years of life in the Tao sect. Some things were really difficult to say. I know you have questions in your hearts. You want to know why I entered the Tao sect under the alias of Li Chuji? Qin Hao paused. Seeing that everyone was even more nervous, he continued. In fact, it's not a secret. I don't have any purpose in joining the Tao sect. However, it doesn't matter to you whether you know or not. It's better to let it all stay in the beautiful memories. In short, the Tribulation Sword Emperor received help from others. In order to repay the kindness, he had a beautiful encounter with the Tao sect. Senior, Chu Biechio heard something and suddenly became very excited. Don't ask anything. The people who have already left will never come back. You just need to let the Tao sect's martial arts heritage be passed down from generation to generation. Do your best until the glory of the ancestors is restored. Don't let down the wisdom of the ancestors. Qin Hao didn't want to tell their descendants about the eastern sky and Shermu. It would only add to their sadness and affect his state of mind. The evil soul slaughtering the divine palace was a scar that every disciple of the divine palace could never erase. Understood. We will do our best to train little Dong. We won't disappoint the senior and the ancestors of the Tao sect. Shi Yongnian sighed, and a trace of sadness flashed in his eyes. Since the Sword Emperor had said so, if they still couldn't understand, the three leaders of the Tao sect were too weak. Perhaps the Tribulation Sword Emperor had seen a generation of ancestors of the Tao sect. Then, thinking about Shi Dong's bloodline, everything was clear. Master, are you leaving? Shi Dong's eyes were red. Yin Qingqing tightly pursed her lips and tried not to cry, for fear of affecting everyone's mood. Chapter 1692. Yes. Qin Hao nodded slightly. Ji Biechio's body trembled, and a simple yes was heard. Everyone felt sad at the same time. Sure enough, he still had to leave Taoism. Shi Dong suddenly felt empty, as if a piece of his soul had been taken away. He clenched his fists tightly, as if he could grasp something, but in the end, he slowly loosened his fists. He could not let himself be his master's shackle. The path of Tribulation's Sword Emperor was broader than the sky of Nanjiang City. In the future, don't let little Dong practice swordsmanship. He is not good at it, and his bloodline power is in a mess. You should focus on his talent and try to teach him Taoism techniques so that he can understand the essence of it. Qin Hao instructed. In the tomb, Shi Dong fought Lu Guang and Dui Tianchong. It was the first time he used the power of his soul, and it was completely based on his feelings. He did not control his power well, and many of his attacks were full of loopholes. Not to mention the huge consumption of his soul power, the effect was not ideal. Sword cultivators were extremely murderous. Eastern Sky's soul power was destined to not reach the great Tao realm, so he should play to his strengths and avoid his weaknesses, and strengthen his power of Taoism techniques. The great Tao Milky Way was ever-changing, and the illusion of Taoism techniques could be used to the fullest. Shi Dong had mastered the essence, and once he fought, the enemy would not be able to resist. The battle followed his rhythm from beginning to end. In contrast, Shirlang Sword Seal had the murderous power of Sword Tao. We will remember, Shi Yongnian said. Shi Yongnian said. From now on, they would earnestly listen to every instruction of the Sword Arch and execute it firmly. In addition, Shi Jinhua. Qin Hao paused and looked at Elder Qi. That bastard has been removed from his position as an elder of the Sword Valley and transferred to the back of the mountain to guard the tomb. He can never preach again. If Biechio and the others did not stop me, I would have killed this bastard. Elder Qi was so angry that his face turned red. He really expected better from Shi Dong. Guarding the tomb, that's good. Qin Hao did not interfere. He could see that Elder Qi was fierce, but he could not kill him. After all, Shi Dong was his grandson. Moreover, Shi Jinhua was indeed thinking for Taoism from a certain point of view. His nature had not reached the point of incorrigible. Since he was a descendant of the Shi clan, even if he did not belong to Shi Mu's lineage, he did not deserve to die. Let's see if he can wake up in the future. In addition, Taisui Mountain and Void Striking Sect migrated overnight several days ago. Both of them disappeared without a trace. Boshang secretly sent people to keep an eye on them. The Taisui Emperor, an old ancestor striking Kong, ran pretty fast. You want to run after making me unhappy? It's not that simple. Don't worry, they will come back obediently. Qin Hao said. He had already predicted the fate of the three sects in the future. Under the general situation, old Taoist Strikong and the Taisui Emperor had no choice but to flee. Everyone laughed and guessed that the Sword the Arch had other plans. They couldn't help but worry for Patriarch Strikong. All right, Elder Yu. Qin Hao stood up and raised a hand to stroke Yin Qingqing's head. Qingqing, this girl, although her talent isn't good and she has a carefree personality, she's actually very meticulous. She can understand even the slightest detail. You're getting old, and you need an obedient child. After I leave, Qingqing will learn alchemy from you. Okay. Elder Yu glanced at Yin Qingqing. The ancestors of the Yin clan lived at the foot of the mountain, and generations of them respected the Taoist sect. Yin Qingqing's foundation and talent were indeed not up to expectations. But since the Sword the Arch took a liking to her and took her as his disciple, she must have something extraordinary. Master, you don't want me anymore. At this moment, Yin Qingqing failed to live up to expectations and shed tears. Her comprehension and physique were indeed not good. How good could her bloodline be when she was born in a poor family of hunters? However, her master had never despised her. He allowed her to brag and complain all day long. Elder Yu, you're more blessed than me. Master's path is too hard. Qin Hao sighed. When he took Yin Qingqing into the herb garden from the outer sect, he saw that she was optimistic, sunny, and pure. It seemed that no setback could defeat her. It was precisely this kind of spirit that was rare in the martial arts world. Okay, since you're happier with Elder Yu, I won't pester you anymore. In the future, when I'm not here, you have to take good care of yourself. Then I really can't bear to leave you. Yin Qingqing choked with sobs and opened her arms to hug Qin Hao's waist. She was like a cat that couldn't bear to let go of its master. Qin Hao didn't resist this time. After 8 years in the herb garden, he had watched his 2 disciples grow up. They could be considered half his children. He sighed deeply. If he was only the Tribulation Sword sovereign in this life, he would be very happy to stay in the herb garden. Unfortunately, he had a more important mission to complete. Remember to take good care of your junior brother. Bah! Yin Qingqing let go. Sherdong is stronger than me now. You should take care of me in the future. Master, don't worry. I'll take good care of senior sister. Sherdong followed closely. Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed. These 2 little guys. The Sword Sovereign took in this pair of clowns. It turned out that life in the herb garden was so interesting. Compared to the various dojos of the Tao sects, it seemed a little less humane. Senior, are you leaving today? Why don't you stay for a few more days? Sherdong is growing rapidly. His martial arts needs more guidance from you. Also, Jean Biechio hesitated. There was a hint of worry in his tone. The Holy Palace? Qin Hao said, Don't worry, before leaving the Tao sects, I will take care of everything. Calculating the time, Chinning should be here soon. Hiss! Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Even though the Tribulation Sword Emperor's cultivation level was high, it was still too direct for him to call out the name of Imperial Master Shui Yao's direct disciple. Could it be that they knew each other? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Rays of light shuttled through the distant void. The platinum aura that ran through the sky was so eye-catching. There were more than one of them. Many emperors had arrived in groups, heading straight for the Qilin Dao Mountain. In an instant, the overwhelming pressure of an emperor swept across the 15 counties of Nanjiang. Countless cultivators and common people bowed to the ground in fear. These auras were no stranger to them. Being under the rule of Empress Shui Yao, how could they not recognize that these were from the Holy Palace? Finally, the will of the Holy Palace descended on the Dao Mountain. On this day, the 15 counties of Nanjiang were once again in an uproar. Speaking of which, I'm here. A trace of joy flashed in Qin Hao's eyes as he looked at the large number of platinum auras in the void. Jean Biechio and the others suddenly became extremely nervous. There was more than one Emperor Yuan from the Holy Palace here. There were actually 7 or 8 of them. Moreover, there were even Ren Huangs accompanying them. Could it be that they were going to use force again? As they spoke, powerful auras quickly descended, and they accurately landed in the Dao Mountain herb garden. After all, Qin Hao's aura was too familiar to Qian Ning. He was the number one person in the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace. He was an existence that she couldn't afford to offend or forget. Qin, I didn't expect it to really be you. Emperor silhouettes descended one after another. Jean Bietchio and the others felt their knees go soft and their scalps go numb. The person in the lead was the most favored eldest disciple of Empress Shuai-Yao. She was also the future supreme ruler of the Shuai-Yao Empire, Holy Maiden Qianning. It turns out that they really know each other. Bo Shang's head shook violently, and he had the urge to faint. Qianning walked directly towards Qin Hao. She was also very surprised. However, this was the southern land of the East Continent. Dinda's name was taboo, but Qin Hao had the same name as him. Even if they were far away from the eastern land of Daqin, calling out his name would still cause some panic. Qianning understood why Qin Hao changed his name to Li Chuji. How have you been? Miss Ru Shuang, you are actually with Qianning. Qin Hao stepped forward and was about to greet them when he suddenly saw a face like cream behind Qianning. She was the daughter of Yin Lao Bei, the Array Emperor of Beijiang's Array Formation Guild. The two were very familiar with each other, but they met in the East Continent. At this moment, Qin Hao's expression unconsciously turned solemn. He almost instinctively felt that something big was going to happen. Qin, Chu-san, my father is missing. I have been looking for him for almost 10 years. As soon as she saw Qin Hao, face like cream burst into tears. Chapter 1693. In the Taoist herb garden, Qian Ning, the first saintess of the Shuai-Yao Holy Kingdom, came with a group of people. Face like cream, the daughter of Emperor Yin of the Northern Border Matrix Guild, came with the group. Friends reunited and cried as soon as they saw each other. Emperor Yin had disappeared. Qin Hao was quite surprised when he heard the news. His expression became serious as he said, "Follow me inside to talk. The rest of you stay." Then, he walked into the room. There were too many people around. Qin Hao didn't want to expose his Xiliang background in the East Continent. Qian Ning and face like cream followed without hesitation. After entering the room, Qian Ning set up a barrier. "Uncle Yin, what happened?" Qin Hao sat down and pointed to the chair beside him. The two sat down together. Face like cream wiped the tears from her face with a handkerchief. She calmed herself down and said, "I don't know the details. It started after your wedding. When they escaped from the Divine Palace safely, Qin Hao led 300 people from the Divine Palace to destroy the Xianyuan family in the Southern Territory. Then, he killed Emperor Yin and Emperor Fu in the northern border. He married Xiao Han successfully and held a grand wedding. More than 100 emperors attended, including more than a dozen imperial lords. During the wedding, Miori used an imperial illusion matrix to make the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace appear. It was short-lived and shocked the cultivators of the 3 territories. It was unprecedented and would not happen again in the future. At the wedding, as the leader of the Northern Border Matrix Guild and a close friend of Xiao Yi, face like cream was naturally present. But before that, Yin Lao Bei had disappeared. On the wedding day, there were many guests and emperors. Qin Hao couldn't take care of them all. Face like cream was also in a bad mood. She didn't go up to Qin Hao and Xiao Han to propose a toast. She drank alone in an inconspicuous corner. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Qin Hao said. Senior Yin had helped her before. Moreover, he still had the title of Honorary Elder of the Array Formation Association. It was reasonable to say that if Face Like Cream asked, he would definitely not ignore it. "It wasn't easy for you and little sister, Xiao Han, to be together. You're newlywed, so how could I ruin your mood?" Face Like Cream said. Alas, Qin Hao sighed. No wonder Array Emperor Yin was not present on the day of the wedding. As the leader of the northern borderline, Yin Lao Bei should not have been absent due to his relationship with his father-in-law. He did not expect this to be the reason. 10 years ago, Qin Hao raised his eyebrows slightly. He was very sensitive about this timing because it happened to be the time when everyone escaped from the Divine Palace. Yin Laobei's disappearance also happened during this time. Was it coincidence? In the beginning, I didn't pay much attention to it. My father was like that. He often disappeared for no reason, and the time he spent with me was very short. But every year, on the anniversary of my mother's death, he would come early to pay his respects. No matter where he was, no matter how busy he was, he would never miss this day. In the first year, the purple evil flower disappeared from my mother's grave. I knew then that my father did not come. At that time, I thought that he was too busy and had forgotten about my mother's death anniversary. But in the second year, the third year, until now, the purple evil flower has not appeared. It was my mother's favorite flower when she was alive. That's when I realized the severity of the situation. Since 6 years ago, I have been searching everywhere for him. Until today, I still can't find him. Yin Rushuang couldn't help but shed tears when she spoke of her emotions. Her mother died early, and she had never met her birth mother. She and Yin Laobei depended on each other for survival. Array Emperor Yin was her only support. As the daughter of an emperor, Face Like Cream naturally did not lack anything since she was born. But this did not mean that her life was better than others. She even envied other people's families. Especially on New Year's Day, she yearned for the atmosphere of a commoner's home. To her, being a member was a luxury. In the past, she always felt that Yin Laobei was not good. She was already used to her father disappearing without a trace. But in the past 10 years, she realized that she could not leave her incompetent father. He was so important. My people told me that they found traces of my father in the East Continent. I rushed over and used Qianning's power to try to find him. But in the end, the senior who was proficient in array skills was not my father. In the past 10 years, Face Like Cream was very anxious and muddle-headed. Although the Array Formation Association was a powerful force in the northern borderline, it was not much in the East Continent. Luckily, they had a good relationship with the Water Jade Holy Empire. That was why they had the opportunity to meet Qianning. With Qianning's status, she did not need to appear. She was not the only holy lady in the Holy Palace. She could have arranged for someone else. After all, her status was the highest. Perhaps this was fate. Qianning and Yin Rushuang met by chance, and the two felt like old friends at first sight. They chatted happily, and Qianning could empathize with Yin Rushuang's feelings. Thus, she began to help Yin Rushuang with all her might. The Water Jade Holy Empire spread out and searched everywhere, slowly expanding into the 5 realms. Although it took a lot of effort, the Water Jade Holy Empire's power was limited. Within the 5 realms, there were many overlords and monarch lords. There were many forbidden places that even the holy palaces dared not enter. I'm very happy to be able to help a friend. Unfortunately, I did not help much, Qianning said. Qianning said. She was lonely in the sacred palace. She was not as noble as people thought. No matter what, I have to thank you. Qianning, it is worth it to have a sister like you in this life. Face Like Cream and Qianning looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Cough, cough. Sorry to disturb you. There is still me. If you need anything, just let me know. Qin Hao, will not refuse. In front of 2 old friends, Qin Hao did not hide his name. By the way, you found the right person to look for. He is stronger than me. There are many places in the 5 domains that I cannot go. Qin Hao can go easily. You may not know this, but there is no one in the 5 domains that he does not know. Qianning still remembered the 300 disciples of the Divine Palace. In fact, there were more than 300 disciples who escaped from the Divine Palace. There were more than 500 of them. Some of them might have died in the inland sea, but there was definitely a small number of them who were still alive. At the very least, Qin Hao held a wisp of the divine souls of 300 powerful heirs. With one order, the 5 domains of the East Continent would follow Qin Hao. Really? Qianning looked at Qin Hao as if she saw a ray of hope. Cough, cough. I was originally planning to leave the Dao sect, but I will still be in the East Continent. Don't worry. I will immediately activate my power and tell my disciples about Uncle Yan's appearance and abilities. If there is any similarity, they will report it to me immediately. Since Qian Ning needed it, Qin Hao was naturally duty-bound. After all, when the 300 disciples returned from the divine palace, they would probably be idle at home. He would arrange something for them to do and not waste their lives. Qin Hao, thank you. You are my saviors. Face Like Cream grabbed Qin Hao's hand excitedly. She was very touched. Don't be like this. I'm married. Qin Hao retracted his hand and smiled awkwardly. Qian Ning rolled her eyes at him. You didn't even inform me that you were going to marry Xiao Han. Otherwise, my master and I would have personally attended the wedding. Otherwise, senior sister. All right, where is senior sister? Why didn't you tell me that you were coming to the Dao sect? Only Muri and Qin Hao were left in the Migres hall. According to the old ancestor's temper, she should be inseparable from Qin Hao. Why was Qin Hao the only one left? Qin Hao's face suddenly darkened. He said in a heavy tone, "It's a long story. However, I can solve it myself. As for the Dao sect, I came to see the descendants of Eastern Sky's senior brother and brother Shermu. I want to see if anyone bullied them. Oh, don't be nervous. The matter with Granny Nye is in the past. I won't hold a grudge." Hiss. Qian Ning sucked in a cold breath. The descendants of Eastern Sky from the Migres Hall and Shermu from the Daozong Peak, the terrifying existences of the Nirvana Heavenly Emperor and the Flawless Heavenly Emperor, were actually in the Dao sect. Qian Ning's horizons were broadened today. She didn't expect the two great emperors to come from a small place like the Dao Mountain. No wonder Qin Hao came here. Qian Ning immediately understood many things. Eastern Sky, Shermu, and Sherdong? Granny Nye. Qian Ning shouted and waved her hand to remove the enchantment. Qin Hao won't hold a grudge? She had personally experienced how the Xianyuan clan had been destroyed in that battle. Won't hold a grudge? Who would believe that? Chapter 1694. I, Nye, am here to apologize to Emperor Li. The enchantment dissipated, and Nye Sippo stepped in. She knelt in front of Qin Hao, her body close to the ground. Her body trembled slightly, and her heart jumped up and down. She was very uneasy. That day, when they left the Path Mountain, the will of the Red Lotus fire remained on Shiming's face. The handprint was like a birthmark that could not disappear. Qian Ning immediately recognized it. This method and aura were very similar to Qin Hao's soul fire. Without any questions, Nye Sippo took the initiative to tell Qian Ning what happened. She thought that Qian Ning would stand up for her, but she did not expect to be scolded angrily. That day, Qian Ning summoned several emperors and brought Nye Sippo back. Coincidentally, Face Like Cream was also in the Holy Palace. They traveled together without stopping. Just as Qin Hao expected, Qian Ning would arrive in 4 days at the fastest speed. Get up. Let bygones be bygones. I don't take it to heart. Qin Hao did not even look down. Nye Sippo had raised Qian Ning and could be considered half a foster mother. They were friends, and the elders of friends were his elders. If it were anyone else in the divine palace, Qin Hao would treat them with respect. If Nye Sippo had not gone too far, he would not have exposed his identity and suppressed her. Now, she was kneeling in front of him, making it difficult for both sides to step down. Was he really going to punish her? That was not right. If Qin Hao killed Nye Sippo, wouldn't Qian Ning be disappointed? He said that he wanted Qian Ning to apologize, but in fact, he just wanted to see her. He had asked Qian Ning to take care of the Taoist sect. How could he really punish her? Then it was not that petty. Emperor Li, please punish me. You can punish me however you want. I will not complain. Nye Sippo was serious this time. The more Qian Ning said that nothing was wrong, the more afraid she was. Now, even a fool could see that Qian Ning and Li Chuji had a close relationship. Nye Sippo had her current status because she was smart. Qian Ning rarely left the Holy Palace and had almost no friends. She only went on a long trip once, which was 10 years ago. Li Chuji's background was not simple. What's more, the daughter of Emperor Yin, Lady Ru Shuang, was very close to Li Chuji. When I tell you to get up on the 3rd day of the Lunar New Year, you should behave yourself. Ning was so angry that she wanted to laugh. She secretly scolded him. "Haven't you embarrassed me enough? Stand to one side." Sippo shuddered and quickly got up from the ground. She stood behind Ning and lowered her head. Her hands clutched her dress tightly. It was obvious that she was still very nervous. Biqiu, Yongyan, Bo Shang, and the fellow Taoists of the Sacred Palace, come in. Qin Hao. Emperor Li, the Holy Palace is ashamed. An old granny who was holding a heaven-connecting vine and wearing a purple and gold phoenix robe was the first to enter. Immediately after, she coldly stared at Sippo. Although Sippo didn't raise her head, she still felt her body suddenly turn cold and trembled even more violently. Taiwa, the Holy Palace, 8th level of the Tao, Proving Realm, 3rd level of the Tao, Proving Realm, 3rd level of the Tao, Proving Realm, and 3rd level of the Tao, Proving Realm. Even my master has to call you senior when he sees you. Ning explained with a smile. She had been an elder for 3 generations and had come to the Tao Mountain to apologize. It was obvious that she was very sincere this time. Senior Taiwa, I have heard a lot about you. Qin Hao stood up and cupped his hands. You are really a peerless talent. Emperor Li is so young, but his Emperor Tao is so profound. 8th level of the Tao, Proving Realm. I am embarrassed to be called senior. Granny Taiwa praised. She saw through Qin Hao's cultivation level. Qin Hao's face suddenly tightened, and he was greatly shocked. Senior can actually see through the details of my cultivation. Don't be nervous. Granny Taiwa's soul power is special. She is a fortune teller. No secret in the world can escape her eyes. 10 years ago, when the signs appeared, she divined for me. The divination showed that I would turn misfortune into fortune. That is why I dared to step into the divine palace. Ning explained with a smile. She looked at Qin Hao with surprise. You, on the other hand, have improved so fast. 8th level of the Tao, Proving Realm, only 1 level away from the Imperial Lord. I'm only 3rd level. After the battle in the southern region, the disciples of the Divine Palace had scattered. At that time, Ning remembered Qin Hao had reached the 2nd level of the Tao, Proving Realm. He had broken through 6 levels in 8 years. No wonder he was the top genius of the 7 Peaks. Ning Tianxing and Qing Jihan would not be able to catch up. Is it fast? I think it is too slow. Qin Hao smiled bitterly. If Ning knew how he had spent the past 8 years. He had been refined by the qi of the 5 spirits of South Sky Peak. Every day felt like a year. She would not have said it was fast. In fact, 8 years ago, Qin Hao could have directly become an Imperial Lord. However, that level of Imperial Lord was not the orthodox path of the Divine Palace. He was not much different from the ordinary Imperial Lords of the outside world. This was not the result Qin Hao wanted. However, Granny Taiwa in front of him had the power of divination. This made Qin Hao more vigilant. Fortune tellers were very rare. They were even rarer than alchemists and armorers. These people were born with bad luck. Because they peeped into the heavenly path, they usually did not live long. It was difficult to reach the Renhuang realm, let alone the Imperial Lord. A fortune teller like Granny Taiwa, who was in the 8th level of the Tao, Proving Realm, could be considered an old demon. In my entire life, I've only used the divination number 3 times. That's why I've been able to live until now. Even so, those 3 times of prying into the secrets of the heavens made me pay a heavy price. If it weren't for that, there wouldn't be the current Shui Yao. The depths of Granny Taihua's eyes were full of vicissitudes. Qin Hao's heart trembled violently. How could he not understand the meaning of the old woman's words? If it weren't for the fact that she was greatly injured after peeping into the heavenly path 3 times, Granny Taihua's strength would definitely surpass Shui Yao's. Emperor Li, your life is very bumpy. I have a word of advice for you. Please look at everything with your heart. Don't trust your eyes too much. That's all I have to say, Granny Taiwa said. After she finished speaking, her face turned slightly pale. Obviously, she had used a trace of the power of divination, but it didn't have much effect. She didn't dare to pry into Qin Hao's situation too deeply. nor could she see that Dinde had recultivated for 2 lifetimes. Even so, Granny Taiwa could still vaguely sense that Qin Hao's life was extraordinary. "Thank you for your advice." Qin Hao bowed. He didn't quite understand the meaning of Granny Taiwa's words, but he would silently keep it in his heart. Look at everything with your heart. Don't trust your eyes too much. What does she mean? At this moment, except for Emperor Yuan of the Water Jade Sacred Palace, Ji Bieqiu and the others of the Dao sect were all incomparably respectful. They even looked at Granny Taiwa with awe. Their abilities were the same as the Dao ancestors. Often, such people didn't live long, but they were undeniably powerful. They could even reverse the universe. "Qianning, I'm pressed for time. There are still many things I need to do. I will pay attention to the whereabouts of Uncle Yan. In addition, there is one more thing I need to entrust to you." Qin Hao said, "Don't stand on ceremony, just say it." Qianning vaguely guessed what Qin Hao wanted to express. "After I leave, please leave Qilin Daoist Mountain and my disciple, Sherdong, to the sacred palace. I don't need the Imperial Lord to bestow anything. I just want the Dao sect to be safe and sound." Qin Hao said. He took a deep look at Sherdong and Qing, reluctant to part with them. "It's a small matter, don't worry. I plan to merge the forces of Nanjiang. The striking Kong sect and Taisui Mountain will be integrated into the Dao sect. From now on, there will only be one sect in Nanjiang. No matter what happens, whether it's an opportunity or a fortuitous encounter, let them bear it together." Qian Ning said, "That's naturally better." Qin Hao chuckled. In fact, he had already guessed that there would be such an outcome. The breathing of Ji Bieqiu and the others became much heavier. As expected, Taisui Emperor and old ancestor striking Kong sect couldn't escape. With the merger of the 3 sect, Daoist Mountain would monopolize Nanjiang. In this situation, the Dao sect was rapidly growing stronger. Could it be that the sect was also showing signs of atavism? Faintly, tears flickered in the eyes of Elder Qi and Elder Yu. They seemed to have seen the glorious future of the sect. "All right, if we talk for too long, I won't be at ease. Let's end it here." After everything was settled, it was time for Qin Hao to leave. He walked to the door and pointed to the southern sky peak. He smiled meaningfully and said, "Before I leave, I'll give you a treasured place to cultivate. It will make you miss the 9 Heavens spiritual waterfall and the Xiantian Kar's cave." "Hey, do you think I don't know that the southern sky peak contains the 5-spirit earthly qi? There's no need for you to give it to me. It belongs to the sacred palace." Qian Ning pursed her lips and looked at Granny Taiwa with a wronged expression. Qin Hao's heart skipped a beat. That's it. No wonder she's a fortune teller. The southern sky ley line is like a giant palm holding up the entire southern land. It's the source of life in the southern land. I knew about it 400 years ago. At first, I was excited and wanted Shui Yao to move the sacred palace to this peak. But later, Granny Taiwa shook her head and smiled. The heavenly axiom decreed that the southern sky has a master. The master is the Tribulation Sword Sovereign. Senior, I'm impressed. Qin Hao's eyes were filled with tears. He suddenly had the urge to become her disciple. 400 years ago, the fortune teller was so accurate. No, it couldn't be that Granny Taiwa used her power to calculate it. This fortune teller was too powerful. Oh no, Granny Taiwa suddenly seemed to sense something. Her expression changed drastically and her old body trembled violently. Boom! As soon as she said that, the entire southern sky peak collapsed and disappeared under Qin Hao's finger. Young friend, your doom is coming. Granny Taiwa took a deep breath and looked at Qin Hao. At the same time, the emperor intent in her body surged wildly. Although the target was Qin Hao, she couldn't ignore it since it was the Shui Yao Saint country. Chapter 1695. Qian Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Capture. The heavenly Tao had decreed that everything was predestined. 400 years ago, the sacred palace seized the 5-spirit earthly energy from the South Sky Peak. 400 years later, the South Sky Peak Master would definitely ask for it back in other ways. The Sacred Palace would pay the same price no matter how much they took. It was because of this that Tai Hua followed the rules of the heavenly Tao and let everything develop naturally. By the same logic, Qin Hao had taken something from others. Today, the creditor came to take his life. It was a pity that Tai Hua had just met Qin Hao and couldn't give him a warning in advance. Obviously, he couldn't avoid this calamity. Rumble. The ancient peak collapsed, and the earth veins shook. The entire south border of the east continent trembled. Then, a turbulent array light followed the collapse of the South Sky Peak, forcibly dispersing the dust. The brilliance shot into the sky and radiated wildly toward the surrounding area. In the blink of an eye, it engulfed 15 counties of Nanjiang. The 15 counties were completely covered by the array light. Majestic figures in shining armor appeared in the sky one after another. More and more figures appeared, densely packed like an army of the divine court. In front of the army, terrifying and majestic auras stood tall. The great Tao Emperor's aura surged and spread. There were no less than a dozen platinum figures, looking down on the world like gods. Accompanied by this, the roar of a sea whale reverberated in the air. It was very abrupt in the interior of the East Continent. What a terrifying array power! Boshong covered his face with his arm. Even though he was in the Tao Peak's herb garden and the South Sky Peak was far away, he couldn't stand steadily when the divine light energy spread over. Someone had secretly set up a spatial teleportation array near the South Sky Peak. The array power was so powerful that it was simply unprecedented. It was enough to support a large number of Yuan thearchs. At this moment, the thearchs of the Sacred Palace led by old man Tai Hua trembled. They were nervous as if they were facing a great enemy. The huge array in the void was too shocking. Even if the two overlord forces were to fight, it wouldn't be as terrifying. They are coming for me. Qin Hao looked up, and the veins on his fists were popping. See Sky Shaker clan. It had been almost 10 years since Fong's death. Who would have thought that the moment his identity was exposed, the Sea Shaker translation. The CC? Translation. Chu San, how did you provoke them? Qian Ning asked seriously. I killed the grandson of old ancestor Han Tian. Qin Hao replied. He could no longer hide the truth. Besides, it might not be a good thing to hide it from Qian Ning. Young friend, you won't be able to escape this calamity no matter what. Sigh. Old man Tai Hua shook his head and sighed. Even if she stepped forward, she wouldn't be able to stop the Gue clan. Qin Hao's eyebrows twitched violently. This was a natural reaction of his body when his life was threatened. For 10 years, Emperor Song Yao had not let go of Fong's death. However, he couldn't figure out how the other party knew he was in the Water Jade Holy Nation. Unless Song Yao had been secretly sending people to spy on him for the past 10 years. It wasn't until Nye Sippo forced out Qin Hao's imperial body 4 days ago that he revealed the Red Lotus Fire. Only then did the Gue clan truly confirm his identity. It was the same Dao fire as the one that killed Fong. To be able to endure for 10 years, just the thought of it was terrifying. In fact, Qin Hao's guess wasn't wrong. In the past 10 years, Song Yao had indeed been secretly sending people to follow him, and this person was proficient in the Tao of formations. The Gue clan went to the Zhuiying Sword Palace in the Middle Realm to seek confirmation. Although the Zhuiying Sword Emperor admitted that Li Chuji was his disciple, Emperor Song Yao didn't believe it. 10 years, a full 10 years of observation, finally he got the result. Li Chuji was the murderer who killed Fong. On the day Nye Sippo left the Tao sect, Emperor Yuan, who was proficient in the Tao of formations, set up a spatial teleportation array on the South Sky Peak. After 4 days and 4 nights, the array finally took shape. Using the teleportation array, the Sky Shaker clan directly arrived in Nanjiang City from Penglai in the East Sea. If I can't hide, then so be it. Their target is only me. Qianing, Ru Shuang, don't interfere, especially the two of you. Qin Hao looked back at the people from Zhubi Qiu's Tao sect with mixed feelings. Remember, don't make a move. Nurture Shi Dong well. After speaking, Qin Hao didn't even look back. He spread his 12 emperor wings, and blood-colored demonic flames surged around his body. He directly soared into the sky and stood above the void. Revenge? He was waiting for Tsang Yao here. Qin, Li Chuji, don't be impulsive. Qian Ning gritted her teeth fiercely and looked at old man Taiwa. The old man nodded gently. In an instant, the Holy Palace's emperors surged with white gold emperor light. They all flew into the sky and stood behind Qin Hao. After all, Nanjiang was ruled by the Shueiyao Holy Palace. The Sky Shaker clan could capture people as they wished and set up this spatial teleportation array. They were so unscrupulous. Did they think that the Holy Palace didn't exist? Miss Wei, face like cream, only had Emperor Yuan behind her, and he was only at the first level. In addition, there were 2 human sovereigns. Facing such a terrifying battle array, they were really not qualified to intervene. Follow me. Face like cream clenched her fists and flew into the sky after Qian Ning. Even Qian Ning could do this. Her friendship with Qin Hao was even better than Qian Ning's. Was she still human if she abandoned him at this time? When Emperor Yuan of the Array Formation Guild saw Face like cream flying into the sky, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and follow her. However, he wouldn't die in battle for Qin Hao. Yongyan, Boss Hang, follow me. The rest of you stay. Old Man Shi, Old Man Yu, look after Sherdong and seal his cultivation. With a deep shout, the 3 sovereigns, Feng Bi and Xiu Yu, rose into the air. Old Man Shi didn't give Sherdong any chance to resist. He released the power of a Yuan Venerate and pressed Sherdong to the ground. Old Man Yu also subdued Qingqing. If today was the tribulation of the Tribulation Sword Emperor, the Dao sect was willing to bear it together. In the boundless void, astral winds whistled. The Sky Shaker race's army soon came crushing over. They stood firmly above the Dao mountain like the army of the Divine Court. At this time, nearly 20 emperors from both sides raged and intertwined. Under the pressure of the terrifying Emperor Aura, the people of the 15 counties on the ground were so scared that they prostrated themselves on the ground as if they were welcoming the end of the world. What was going on in Nanjiang? In the past, there were only a few human sovereigns from the 3 sections. Since the arrival of the Tribulation Sword Emperor, emperors would appear every few days. Today, it was the most terrifying. There were nearly 20 of them, just like gods. The Sky Shaker race destroyed my Nantian Dao Peak and sent troops to invade my Water Jade Holy Empire. Why? As soon as they met, Old Man Taiwa shouted majestically. His deep voice swept forward and trembled in front of the Sky Shaker race's army. Sky Shaker race, Feng Sangyao. In front of the army, a handsome young man in a dazzling imperial robe stepped forward. His snow-white hair fluttered in the wind, and his sharp eyes pierced Qin Hao's eyes. Then, he glanced at Old Man Taiwa indifferently. Water Jade Holy Palace, Taiwa, Old Man Taiwa said. It's the Sky Shaker race's fault for disturbing the Holy Palace, but because of the urgency of time, we didn't think too much about it. Please forgive us, the old emperor said. After all, this place was under the rule of the Water Jade Imperial Lord. Even if they wanted to capture someone, it was inappropriate to use force against the Holy Palace. Haha, blame? Old Man Taiwa sneered. Our Holy Palace can't afford to blame you. Bringing so many emperors here, it was obvious that he came prepared. Even if the Water Jade Imperial Lord came in person today, she wouldn't be able to stop Feng Sangyao. He didn't take the Holy Palace seriously at all. I only came for one person this time. I hope that the Holy Palace won't interfere. As for the destroyed Dao Peak, the Sky Shaker race is willing to compensate you tenfold. Emperor Sangyao's eyes were cold as he walked towards Qin Hao. Are you going to take the initiative to come with me? Or do you want to fight? Emperor Sangyao, don't go too far. Qian Ning shouted. She also stepped forward and stood beside Qin Hao. How arrogant was the Sky Shaker race? Tenfold compensation? Did they think that the Holy Palace was a group of beggars? They directly ignored them and took Qin Hao away with just one sentence. The Holy Palace's holy maiden? Emperor Song Yao glanced at Qian Ning coldly. Amir Jr., do you know any etiquette? Etiquette, Qian Ning sneered. The Sky Shaker race knows any etiquette? Qianning is the #1 holy maiden of the Holy Palace, the future successor of the Water Jade Imperial Lord. Is she so incompetent in the eyes of your Excellency Tsang Yao? Old man Taiwa stepped forward, passing Qin Hao and standing at the forefront. If Qianning is incompetent, then can I make your Excellency look me in the eye? Hey, old woman, don't meddle in other people's business. Behind Emperor Tsang Yao, a shirtless and extremely burly Sea General let out a rough voice. The pair of divine hammers in his hands glowed with extremely terrifying imperial light. They were the arch artifacts. Chapter 1696. How dare you? Nye Sippo shouted loudly. Taiwa was an old minister of the Sacred Palace and had contributed to the founding of the Sacred Palace. Even the Water Jade Empress respected him. How could he allow the Sky Shaker race to be so rude? Emperor Light flowed in his palm, and the dilly in Nye Sippo's body roared. He raised his hand and blasted a palm at the Sky Shaker, High General. The space rumbled as the invisible palm force instantly closed in. The Sky Shaker, High General, had a disdainful look on his face. The hammers in his palms rubbed against each other lightly, and a violent platinum spark appeared. The Sacred Palace Emperors could only hear the sound of friction in their divine souls. Then, there was an explosion in front of the Sky Shaker High General, and the Sky Shaker High General was instantly annihilated. What? Nye Sippo's expression changed. The other party didn't use any dilly. He only used the hammers to easily block her Sky Shaker High General. This Tharch artifact was comparable to her third stage Tao validation. Women will always be women. Even after cultivating to the Arch Yuan, you're still all fancy and impractical. You're okay at serving men, but you're weak when fighting. Kuei Hai Jiang laughed in disdain. He stared at Nye Sippo's mature body and scanned it fiercely. You? Nye Sippo was so angry that her chest heaved up and down violently. Step down. You're far from being his opponent. Old man Taihua's expression became more solemn. The Sky Shaker High General's cultivation was at the 7th stage Tao validation, and his physical soul was extremely domineering. With the divine hammer in his hand, one could imagine how strong his combat strength was. She might not be his opponent. I don't want to make things difficult for the Sacred Palace, and the Sacred Palace shouldn't make things difficult for me. Today, I must take her away. Emperor Tsang Yao said indifferently. Isn't the Sky Shaker race afraid of angering the Water Jade Empress? Old man Taiwa asked. Putting aside the fact that they wanted to take her away, did they care about the Sacred Palace's prestige when they invaded the Water Jade Empire? Anger? If the Water Jade Empress was here, I might be afraid of her, but you... Emperor Tsang Yao sneered. You're not qualified to threaten me. You're too arrogant. Old man Taiwa couldn't help but be angry when he heard this sentence. The Sky Shaker, High General in his hand. The emperors of the Sacred Palace were also enraged. The Sky Shaker clan of the Eastern Sea had come to the Southern Land and acted so arrogantly. Seniors, please calm down. There must be some misunderstanding. Junior Face Like Cream, Northern Frontiers Array Formation Guild. Scram. Without waiting for Face Like Cream to finish her sentence, Emperor Tsang Yao glared at her with his cold, emotionless eyes and roared. Instantly, a turbulent air current gathered in the air and swept towards her like a whirlwind, intending to tear her apart. What was the Northern Frontier Array Formation Guild? Ru Shuang, be careful. Qianning was shocked. Face Like Cream was only a Yuan venerate. How could Tsang Yao do that? At this moment, little Yuan Di from the Formation Association, who was fighting behind Face Like Cream, was so scared that his face turned pale. For a moment, he forgot to protect his miss, and even took a few steps back. He was too insignificant in front of Tsang Yao. Bang! The flaming emperor wings flapped, and a wisp of Tao fire shot out, hitting the whirlwind. The two forces shook and were annihilated at the same time. Qin Hao glanced at Face Like Cream. Face Like Cream was so scared that she turned pale. Her body was numb, as if this was the first time in her life that someone had taken her life. Clearly, She was scared out of her wits. You're too arrogant. Even more arrogant than the patriarch of the Sky Shaker race. Qin Hao stepped forward and approached Emperor Song Yao. The distance between them was less than 10 meters. I'm not arrogant when dealing with ants. If you come with me, the rest will be safe. Song Yao said, What a joke. You want me to leave? Why should I? Qin Hao said. Emperor Song Yao narrowed his eyes and stared at Qin Hao. Was he asking the obvious? Do you know what this is? A halo appeared on his palm, and the fragrance of the fruit slowly filled the air. The fragrance was getting stronger and stronger. Song Yao held up a longevity fruit from the Sunset Peak and showed it to Qin Hao. I don't know what you're talking about. Qin Hao's face darkened. He certainly knew what it was, and he even ate it after killing someone. Bang! Song Yao exerted force in his 5 fingers and crushed the longevity fruit in his palm, causing its juice to splash out and stain his clothes as if they were dyed in blood. 9 years ago, during ancestor Han Tian's birthday, my son Fong Ye went to the setting sun peak and begged the setting sun battle god to bestow this fruit. He returned full of joy, but unexpectedly, he was killed on the spot when he passed by his own sea. The Emperor Chi flowing in that area is exactly the same as your aura. How do you explain that? Why should I explain? Qin Hao looked directly at Emperor Song Yao. There are more than 10 million martial artists in the world who are good at Fire Soul. There are many similar ones. If you want to frame me, you can always find a pretext. Frame me? Song Yao laughed. I've never made a mistake in my life. You don't dare to admit that you killed someone. That's not like the descendant of the Daqin Dendi. The descendant of the Daqin Dendi? How? How can this be? Qian Ning, Tai Hua, the emperors of the Sacred Palace, and Zhou Bieqiu all looked at Qin Hao in shock. Dendi of the Daqin, the lord of the 5 realms of the East Continent 600 years ago, the owner of the Sunset Peak. Was Li Chuji a descendant of Dendi? They couldn't express their feelings at the moment. Dendi's name was so shocking that the space became silent. Do you dare to say that you have nothing to do with Dendi? Emperor Song Yao stepped forward and was less than 5 meters away from Qin Hao. The 2 emperors looked at each other, and their auras were strong. Qin Hao clenched his fists. Do I have anything to do with him? Of course, he did, but he didn't answer immediately. He knew very well what consequences he would face in the 5 realms if he admitted it. Even the Taoist sect and the Sacred Palace would be implicated and killed. What is your relationship with Dendi? Did you kill the Lord of the Divine Firmament Palace, Shun Qian? Who is Qin Hao to you? Tell me everything in detail. Song Yao roared, shaking the void. Fong Ye's death and Shun Qian's death seemed unrelated, but they happened at the same time in the East Continent. It seemed to have been deliberately arranged. Other than the dead Daqin Dendi, Song Yao couldn't find any other connection between the two. The silver-haired warrior in front of him must be Dendi's descendant. Qin Hao, Daqin Dendi. How is it possible? This is unbelievable. Qian Ning's eyes were filled with fear as she muttered silently. When she first met Qin Hao, she felt that his name was strange, but there were many people with the same name in the world. After a long time, she slowly got used to it and didn't find it strange. However, when Emperor Song Yao said it, and when she thought about Qin Hao's past in the Sacred Palace, she felt that something was different. Could he really be Dendi's descendant? Not only Qian Ning, but Face Like Cream's expression also changed. Even though she was in Beijiang, she had heard of the legend of Dendi in the East Continent since she was young. Emperor Song Yao was very sensitive to the changes in Qian Ning and Face Like Cream's expressions. The corners of his mouth curled up, and the answer in his heart became more and more certain. You still don't dare to admit it? Coward. Squeak. Qin Hao clenched his fist. Daqin Dendi, who didn't change his name or his surname, deterred the 4 regions and 8 wastelands in the East Continent in his previous life. Today, he was forced by a small emperor, Song Yao, to the point that he didn't even dare to admit his name. One last thing. Come with me, and I can spare the lives of thousands of people below the Path Peak. Otherwise, the Sacred Palace won't be able to withstand the attack of the Sky-Shaking Clan and the Sunset Battle God. Emperor Song Yao said, and looked at Old Man Tai Hua for the last time. Old man Taihua's body trembled violently as he looked at Qin Hao in horror. If he was really Denda's descendant, the sacred palace wouldn't be able to withstand it. Who else could be compared to the sunset battle god? Don't talk nonsense with them. Kid, get over here. The tall and mighty sea general roared, and his body disappeared into thin air. His speed was unbelievably fast, and when he reappeared, he was already above Qin Hao's head. The twin hammers in his hands smashed down. His face was ferocious, bloodthirsty, and excited. It was as if a resplendent mountain was pressing down, suppressing everything in the world. Qin Hao! Qin Hao! Qian Ning and Face Like Cream were shocked and shouted at the same time. Bang! He raised one hand, and Emperor Fire surrounded it, easily blocking the two hammers. Then he pulled down. Qin Hao's other hand strangely grabbed the burly sea general's head in front of everyone's shocked expressions. His white fingers pierced through the sea general's flesh and sank into his skull. Qin Hao slowly looked up, ignoring the screams under his hand. He looked at Emperor Song Yao with a smile and said, "That's right. I killed Fangya and sent someone to kill Shin Qian. I am Qin Hao." Chapter 1697. The shrill scream was earth-shattering. The red lotus tyrannical fire poured into his body, burning his flesh and blood and devouring Emperor Yuan's divine soul. The burly man struggled violently. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, the silence in the void sent chills down one's spine. Emperor Song Yao watched coldly. His snow-white hair fluttered in the wind, and his handsome facial features were emotionless. He was like an emotionless statue. He wouldn't be surprised if the other party admitted that he was a descendant of Dendi, but he didn't believe that this person was Dendi of the East Continent. Old Man Taihua and the emperors of the Sacred Palace naturally didn't believe it either. However, they all stared at Qin Hao's palm. After all, the opponent was a 7th-stage Dao realm powerhouse. Although Qin Hao's cultivation was only one stage higher than the other party, why did it feel like an imperial lord suppressing an ordinary emperor? It seemed that everyone had underestimated Li Chuji's strength. Old Man Taihua, the emperors of the Sacred Palace, the people of the Dao sect, and even the emperors of the Sky Shaker race were all shocked. Only Qian Ning remained calm, although her heart was also pounding. However, thinking back to the battle on Uni Peak, Qin Hao wasn't in the Emperor realm, but he was able to fight against Ning Tianxing with just a wisp of his avatar. Now that he was in the 8th-stage Dao realm, it was normal for him to crush a 7th-stage Yuan emperor. Emperor Song Yao, save me, save me, save. His cries for life came to an abrupt end as dust and ashes scattered. In the blink of an eye, an Emperor Yuan powerhouse who had attained the 7th layer of the Emperor Dao disappeared from everyone's sight. The two divine hammers fell from the sky, drawing two long black lines as they slammed into the ground. They were comparable to two meteorites, and the endless Qilin Dao mountain trembled. During this process, no one made a move. Emperor Song Yao watched coldly as Hai Jiang died in the hands of Qin Hao. He didn't even make a move when the Sky Shaker race's emperor weapon fell. His emperors were firmly locked on a Qin Hao's divine soul. He knew very well that any rash action at this time would cause him to suffer a strong counterattack. This person was more terrifying than he imagined. In 10 years, your cultivation has improved beyond my expectations. The current you is very strong. After a long while, Emperor Song Yao exhaled a breath of air that he had been suppressing. He stretched his limbs and entered a state of absolute relaxation. We're both 8th-stage Dao Corroboration Realm cultivators, but you've only advanced by 2 stages in 10 years. Could it be that your talent is lacking? Qin Hao laughed. Perhaps. Emperor Song Yao nodded. But it's enough to kill you. Boundless Emperor light surged as his dignified Emperor robe burst apart, revealing a set of azure divine armor. He raised his hand, and a sharp trident appeared in Song Yao's hand. He was like a warrior charging forward, his face resolute. Every step he took caused the heavens to tremble violently. He was clearly only 5 steps away from Qin Hao, but he gave off the feeling that he was charging tens of thousands of miles away. In an instant, the trident stabbed towards Qin Hao's throat. It was only 3 inches away from his Adam's apple, but a pair of fingers firmly grasped the tip of the trident. Golden finger. Song Yao frowned. It was one of Dinda's lost arts in the East Continent. Buzz. Terrifying Emperor Qi turned into a gust of wind that swept out. When the two collided, the heavens and earth seemed to shatter. As the force swept across, the emperors of the Sacred Palace and the emperors of the Sky-Shaking Clan all slid back dozens of feet. The sky-reaching vine in Old Man Taihua's hand shone with green emperor light, as if it was rooted in the void. Even so, he still staggered back dozens of steps. So powerful, Taihua's face was twisted. Both of them were proficient in the power of physical martial arts. Their physical strength alone was comparable to the Emperor realm. It turns out that what Chu San said was true. In the Shui Yao Holy Empire, even if the Empress of the Shui Yao Holy Empire comes in person, she can't do anything to him. Jiubiechio and the other two were sent flying far away. Their hair was twisted like a chicken's nest on top of their heads. Just one collision had already made the Run Huang lose the right to watch the battle at close range. Now I'm even more curious. How do you know Patriarch Shermu? Do you think that Chu San is really Dendi? Shi Yongyan asked. Could it be that Patriarch Shermu saved Dendi from the East Continent and saved him 600 years ago, and that calamity caused Patriarch Shermu to die? Return to the Mountain of the Way to set up the Matrix. We may not be able to protect our ancestral land in this battle, unless the great ancestor comes back to life. Jiubiechio directly returned to the Mountain of the Way. It was not that he didn't want to help, but that he really couldn't. The Renhuang had no right to intervene. The only thing they could do was to try their best to not let the disciples be affected. Otherwise, the scene would be unimaginable. Golden finger, and you still say that you're not Dinda's descendant? In the void, Song Yao pointed his halberd at Qin Hao's throat, but it was caught firmly by his 2 fingers. 2 fingers that could withstand an emperor's halberd. In the 4 regions, there was only one person who could do so. I told you, I'm Qin Hao. The white gold emperor's chi flowed at the tip of his finger. The raging halberd light could not break Qin Hao's imperial body. He flicked his finger, and suddenly the sky shook. Extremely terrifying power swept up along the king of God's halberd. Song Yao's hand immediately went numb, and the strength he used to hold the halberd weakened by 30%. He could not even close his fingers. Then, Qin Hao's arms snaked out like a dragon's claw. His 5 fingers pressed down onto Song Yao's shoulder. At that moment, there was a violent cracking sound in the space between the two. Return to the bone-crushing hand. Song Yao's brows furrowed even tighter. This descendant had received the Pill Emperor's true teachings. Although he hadn't seen how powerful the Pill Emperor was 600 years ago, this person's methods were impossible to guard against. Roar! The sea whale roared, and a strange sound wave was spat out from Song Yao's mouth. It entered his divine soul. Qin Hao was affected, and his speed slowed down. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Song Yao's bloodline power surged. He seemed to have turned into a deep-sea battle whale. A phantom of a whale appeared in the void, and the king of God's halberd, which contained an extremely domineering power, pierced forward again. Puff! The halberd directly pierced through Qin Hao. The king of God's halberd's raging emperor's light tore his body to pieces. However, it was just an illusion. At the same time, Song Yao felt an unbearable heat above his head. When he looked up, he saw a terrifying dragon-shaped flame roaring towards him. It flew under Qin Hao's fist, wanting to swallow him into the dragon's mouth. Water, wind, divine evasion. Old ancestor Han Tian's grandson, Song Yao, naturally knew what kind of movement technique this was. He roared, and the bloodline in his body surged. The power of Tao affirmation was integrated into the king of God's halberd. His Yuan spirit was released, and a 100 feet long whale appeared in the void. It spat out a tsunami-like wave at the dragon-shaped flame. Song Yao's entire body was hidden in the giant wave. He went against the flow, and the whale followed his speed. It directly pierced through the flame, and the king of God's halberd pierced towards Qin Hao's face. Give it your all. Otherwise, you won't be able to protect old ancestor Han Tian's dignity. Qin Hao's shimmering fist retracted slightly. A terrifying golden light pierced through his fist, and with a loud bang, it hit the king of God's halberd. This punch almost blasted the king of God's halberd out of Song Yao's hand. The halberd fell to the ground like a falling meteor. Emperor Song Yao. The Sky Shaker race's emperors were shocked. In a huge army, the faces of all the warriors changed. The Sky Shaker race dominated the Eastern Sea with their physical strength. Across the 5 worlds of the Eastern continent, there were very few overlord forces that could match them. Emperor Song Yao had perfectly inherited the power of his family's bloodline, but he was blasted to the ground by a single punch. What kind of power was this? Chapter 1698. Qin Hao stood proudly in the sky, looking down. He didn't give chase. When martial artists stepped into the Arch Realm, both sides would no longer have an advantage in terms of soul power. The stronger one's Dao comprehension was, the stronger their attacks would be. Emperor Song Yao was the descendant of ancestor Han Tian. Even if Qin Hao cultivated to the unblemished Tharch realm, he wouldn't be worthy of dominating the EC if he could defeat him with just a few punches and kicks. The Han Tian race's ability was far more than this. The direct descendants of the Hui race had the ability to transform their martial path twice. Absorb the soul into the body. The wind whistled in his ears. Jean Dilly's sudden burst of power caused a big impact on Song Yao. As his body fell, the Tharch soul in his body shone brightly. The 100-foot whale swimming in the void turned into a dazzling ray of light and disappeared into Song Yao's divine spirit. Buzz! The sky shook. Song Yao stretched his limbs, and a violent cracking sound came from his body. His bones seemed to be growing, and his body grew taller and taller. His flesh and blood continued to strengthen. His slender blue divine armor showed strong lines. His originally handsome facial features turned into an ugly fish head. His feet grew thick flippers, and his messy snow-white hair draped over his shoulders. He looked like a muscular, white-haired water demon. But after Song Yao absorbed the soul into his body, the aura he exuded was far stronger than before. He stepped on the void with his flippers, creating 2 ripples. His majestic body rose violently, and he directly broke free from Jean Dilly's attack. The transformation of his martial path brought him even more majestic power. The divine king halberd in his hand spewed out turbulent sea power and swept toward Qin Hao's chest, wanting to split him in half. Boom! Dragon scales grew on Qin Hao's arms, and he directly blocked the attack. The divine king halberd swept his arms, and he felt as if a deep-sea giant whale had hit his chest. The blood in his body surged, and he was blasted back more than 100 meters in the air. Seeing this, Emperor Yuan of the Han Tian race couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Emperor Song Yao absorbed the soul into his body, and his physical body was sublimated in all aspects. He instantly stabilized the battle from a state of being overwhelmed. He was indeed worthy of being the strongest warrior of the Hui race. Of course, the strength of the silver-haired youth was also amazing. The power of his Flames of the Way could directly burn a 7th-tier Dao affirmation to death. Not only was his will strong, but Dilly could also fight evenly with Emperor Song Yao, which was simply terrifying. In the 5 realms of the East Continent, there are very few people below the Imperial Lord level who can defeat me with their fists. You are a good opponent. The Azure Radiant Divine King, halberd, swept Qin Hao away and stabilized the situation. Similarly, he did not pursue an attack. His opponent was not simple either. It was obvious that he had held back a lot of energy. Are you going to say, I should be proud of this? Qin Hao patted his left and right arms, and the dragon scales on his forearms turned white. Song Yao's strength was greatly enhanced. No, Song Yao shook his head sympathetically. You should feel sad because I love to crush good opponents. Next, with every move, your life will be spent screaming. With that, Song Yao kicked back with his webbed feet. His majestic body was unbelievably fast, like an arrow piercing through the void. In a flash, he closed in on Qin Hao. The divine king halberd contained an incomparably bright emperor light, and a turbulent half-moon slash was slashed from the top of his head, directly towards Qin Hao's brain. A terrible vibration came from the space, and the power even invaded his divine soul. You didn't take my warning seriously at all. Qin Hao smiled coldly. His fists, knees, and back were pierced through by 5 consecutive golden lights. In an instant, the power of the war emperor filled his body, and the power of the desolate wilderness was incomparably domineering. His fists, which were covered in scales, blasted upward again, and a blinding emperor light was released. The divine king halberd slashed down and collided with the emperor light. At this moment, Song Yao's body was overwhelmed with a strong sense of numbness. His hands trembled, and the divine king halberd was sent flying by Qin Hao amidst a series of exclamations. Bang! The sound of flesh being struck rang out. Qin Hao's fist landed on Song Yao's abdomen, and the emperor light on the latter's body suddenly collapsed. Song Yao's mouth was wide open as if he had gastro problems. He hugged his stomach tightly and slowly squatted down. Drops of blood kept flowing from the corners of his mouth and floated down. One punch. Old man Taihua's eyes were wide open, and Qian Ning's face was slightly twisted. Although Qin Hao's talent was undisputed #1 in the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace, the scene of Emperor Song Yao kneeling down with one punch was too shocking. Does it hurt? Why didn't you scream? Qin Hao coldly looked down at the ground beneath his feet. Every move would cause a life to pass with a scream. You deserve to die. Song Yao slowly raised his head, and his emperor's eyes were fierce enough to devour people. He suddenly let out a furious roar, and the bloodline of the Gui clan churned. A soul power more majestic and terrifying than that of the giant whale of the deep sea gushed out from his body. The collapsed emperor light rose again, becoming stronger and stronger. His will merged with heaven and earth, and the void wind and clouds roamed. Terrifying lightning flashed back and forth, and from the doomsday-like cracks, there seemed to be something extremely dangerous falling down. Qin Hao's body quickly retreated. Song Yao's emperor will had locked onto him, and the dangerous thing falling from the sky was constantly approaching Qin Hao. Din had fought with ancestor Han Tian before, so he naturally knew what it was. The second soul of the Gui clan's bloodline, the sky-burying tablet. Whoosh! An enormous stone tablet whistled down from the sky, passing through the crack created by the lightning and directly smashing towards Qin Hao's head. The simple and desolate enormous stone tablet contained an extremely dangerous Emperor Dao insight. Numerous talisman markings were inscribed on it, and they were like brands of curses. Once they struck the opponent, the power of the curse would invade the soul and cause the person to die a tragic death. The sky-burying tablet was the strongest talent of the Sky Shaker clan to dominate the Eastern Sea, and the curse on the tablet was the perfect weapon to kill. Qin Hao's figure shuttled through the lightning with the water wind god step. The 12 emperor wings on his back were scattered. Although the wings were terrifying and could allow him to fly faster, it would greatly affect his agility when fighting in close range. Song Yao Emperor's eyes were bloodshot, and his heart felt like it had been ruthlessly dug out by someone. Qin Hao's punch still caused him to spasm from the pain. He hated it. Other than his father and the ancestor of his clan, he had never knelt to anyone. Even the sunset battle god of the eastern boundaries, Sunset Divine Peak, had only bowed to him. But just now, he was forced to kneel by Qin Hao's punch. It was simply humiliating. The emperor will merged with the sky-burying tablet, and he and the tablet seemed to have merged into one. No matter how Qin Hao dodged, the sky-burying tablet would accurately fall on his previous position, and the giant tablet would not let go. He wanted to see how many Dilly-Dinda's descendants could waste. I won't die if I get hit, but this thing will weaken my emperor will. Qin had been hit by ancestor Han Tian in his previous life. Although his cultivation was higher then, his emperor body was not as strong as it was now. After all, he had a flawless demigod body. Moreover, Song Yao Emperor's Dao was far inferior to ancestor Han Tian's. Even so, Qin Hao was not stupid enough to take it head-on. His water wind god step was executed to the extreme, and his body was as graceful as an immortal. The light of the rules flowed around his body, and Qin Hao's emperor will also raged out. Suddenly, the turbulent void was covered by a layer of fiery clouds. In the fiery clouds, two terrifying giant meteors whizzed out. One of them chased after the sky-burying tablet, while the other fell on Song Yao Emperor's head. Smashing people? Come on. Chapter 1699. You can search for Primordial Alchemy Venerable in Baidu. Wonderful Brush Pavilion to find the latest chapter. The blood-red cloud of fire covered the void, wanting to devour everything. Bolts of lightning penetrated the cloud of fire, slashing back and forth. The rule force of the two emperors collided with each other, trying to overwhelm the other's will. At the same time, two meteorites surrounded by demonic flames fell from the sky, containing domineering and majestic rule force. The whistling sound of falling shook the sky, and one of them fell directly towards Song Yao. When Emperor Song Yao raised his head, his face became a little ugly. The Emperor Dao force contained in the meteorite made him feel a sense of crisis. If he was hit by it, the feeling wouldn't be any better than being hit by the sky burial monument. He suppressed the pain from his heart and roared. His majestic body moved frantically, trying to avoid the bombardment of the meteorite, just like how Qin Hao avoided the sky burial monument. Suddenly, the scene became a little strange. Qin Hao was being chased by two huge rule forces, one gray and one fire, while Song Yao was being chased by a terrifying meteorite. Both of them were desperately dodging. The emperors of the Sacred Palace and the emperors of the Sky Shaker clan couldn't help but sigh. At this moment, Qin Hao was using the water wind step to move. Although the sky burial monument and meteorite were chasing him fiercely, he was still in a relaxed state. He took a quick glance at Song Yao. Emperor Song Yao took a punch from him and activated the power of the 5 palaces. The Emperor Light, protecting his body, collapsed directly. Even though Song Yao's physical body was quite strong, it wasn't much better. In comparison, although Song Yao was being chased by a rule force, he looked much worse than Qin Hao. After all, that punch had a significant impact on him. Run? Let's see who can't last. Qin Hao wasn't in a hurry. If there was anyone who would be hit by the rule force first, it definitely wouldn't be him. The Emperor needs to force out the dilly that invaded his body first. Among the Sky Shaker clan's emperors, one of them said solemnly. The fist force remained in Song Yao's body, and he needed a little time to breathe. Seeing this, another person's palm surged with a platinum luster, and an emperor intent gushed out, wanting to help. Interfering with the battle between the emperor and his opponent. Do you want to die? A long-browed old man with sharp eyes issued a stern warning. That person then sighed and dispersed the power in his palm. Song Yao, the current emperor of the Gui tribe, was extremely talented and was highly regarded by old ancestor Han Tian. However, he was also very prideful. He was lucky enough to defeat Qin Hao because of the help of his tribesmen. Even if he won, he wouldn't feel any sense of accomplishment. Moreover, after the event, the person who did it would be severely punished. This battle only belonged to the descendants of ancestor Han Tian and Dendi. In the void, the two figures kept crossing each other, their emperor will firmly locked onto each other. The 3 balls of aggressive emperor will clung onto each other for half an incense stick's worth of time. It seemed that the two were deliberately competing with each other. Half an incense stick of time was nothing more than a snap of a finger to the long lifespan of an emperor. But in the current situation, This half an incense stick of time was torturous. Qin Hao, or Tsang Yao, controlled the rules to kill the enemy, while also avoiding the other party's attacks. Maintaining the rules of Dao consumed a lot of energy, and they also had to dodge while fighting. No matter which side they were on, Dilly's speed was decreasing sharply, and his movement technique was no longer as agile as before. Of course, the spectators were also frightened, especially the Emperor Realm powerhouses. They knew very well how difficult it was to do what Qin Hao and Song Yao did. Including Tai Hua, there were nearly 20 emperors present, but almost none of them could do it. If it were them, they would have died under the rules of Dao within 3 breaths. Halberd come. Finally, a shout spread. Song Yao was the first to give up. No matter how proud he was, he wouldn't fill his head with pride. The silver-haired young man had received Denda's true teachings. His wind-water steps was exquisite and far more agile than Song Yao. He couldn't continue to maintain his self-esteem. He opened his palm, and his Dharch spirit communicated with the Dharch weapon. The Divine King's halberd, which was blasted away by Qin Hao, made a sharp sound and returned to its owner's hand in an instant. Song Yao's figure suddenly stabilized in the void. He roared and turned around to stab at the meteorite behind him. There was a shocking explosion between heaven and earth. The terrifying Dilly swept across, and the meteorite was directly shattered into nothingness. At the same time, a sneer appeared at the corner of Qin Hao's mouth. His movement technique refracted strangely, and he rushed in the direction of Song Yao at an incredible angle. The sky burial monument and the meteorite behind him roared and blasted out together. Emperor Song Yao had just urged Dilly to shatter Qin Hao's rules. He didn't have a chance to take a breath from beginning to end. At this time, he suddenly noticed that his opponent was rushing over. He roared again, and the Dilly in his body surged. The Divine King's halberd stabbed forward in an instant. The dazzling 3-bladed halberd light directly pierced through Qin Hao's chest, penetrating his body and tearing him into pieces. Phantom, not good. Not a single drop of blood spilled. As Qin Hao's figure dissipated, 2 balls of rules and Dao intent roared and blasted over. Song Yao's expression changed drastically. Rumble. The huge sky burial monument was the first to hit Emperor Song Yao's body. The monument shattered and turned into smoke and dust that filled the sky. Countless curse runes flickered in the dust, frantically eroding everything. It wasn't over yet. The meteorite also smashed into Emperor Song Yao's body. Puff! A muffled groan sounded, and an arrow of blood spurted out from the smoke and dust. Song Yao's emperor body was ruthlessly smashed out. Endless red lotus demonic flames wrapped around the azure divine armor. The divine armor gradually corroded and broke, turning into crystal light that scattered in all directions. At this moment, all the bones in Song Yao's body were groaning in pain. The sky burial monument's curse had entered his body. Relying on the fact that they were of the same origin, he could withstand it. But the power contained in the meteorite's rules seemed to have smashed his limbs and bones, and cracks appeared on his divine soul. Emperor! Emperor! Urgent voices called out one after another. The emperors of the Sky Shaker race looked on in horror. This blow was obviously not light on Song Yao. Water, wind, divine evasion. Song Yao raised his head in pain and looked at the silver-haired man standing quietly in the void. Blood kept flowing from the corners of his mouth. The emperor light on his body flickered, and his aura fluctuated violently. The water, wind, divine evasion was indeed worthy of being the #1 emperor's movement technique in the 5 realms of the East Continent. The instantaneous speed of the reversal could cleverly dissolve the power carried by Emperor Yuan's body, allowing the user to move like the wind and float like water. Does it hurt? 2 rules entered your body. Why didn't you cry out? Qin Hao said indifferently. Next, every move was accompanied by a scream. Hee, I've learned my lesson. Emperor Song Yao didn't reply. Even though he was ridiculed, his eyes were still as cold as before. He looked at Qin Hao and slowly let go of the 3-bladed Divine King halberd. For the first time, anger appeared on his face. The heaven-burying Tao will in his body surged. His will rose into the sky and resonated with heaven and earth. At this moment, lightning flashed above the sky, and cracking sounds could be heard incessantly. It was as if the heavens were angry and wanted to destroy this world. Huge gray shadows continued to fall from the cracks in the sky. Every heaven-burying monument that fell brought with it a suffocating curse power. Like hailstones covering the earth, tens of thousands of heaven-burying monuments buried the entire sky. Looking up, the sky was full of stone monuments, just like the endless graveyard in Nanjiang. Go! Song Yao pointed forward. The heaven-burying monuments that blotted out the sky, and the sun carried the boundless curse power. They covered everything above Qin Hao's head, burying him together with the sky. This Tao will. Tai Hua was shocked. Song Yao was seriously injured, but he could still perform such a terrifying Tao will attack. This person was so strong that he couldn't find many opponents below the emperors of the 5 realms in the East Continent. Looking at the tens of thousands of heaven-burying monuments falling from the sky, even Qian Ning's expression changed. She had to admit that even as a disciple of the Divine Palace, there were monsters in the outside world who weren't inferior to the people of the Divine Palace. Emperor Song Yao was one of them. How many people in the 7 Peaks would be able to block such a move? Unfortunately, he chose the wrong opponent and chose the number 1 person in the 7 Peaks. Chapter 1700. Qin Hao looked up at the sky. The will of the Berry Heaven Emperor covered everything. Within the endless inscriptions, each tablet contained the ultimate cursed Tao will. Song Yao's method was not inferior to Wux's myriad sword Heavenly Mountain's sword formation. This time, he did use his full strength. Although Berry Heaven could do it, it wasn't enough to bury Dendi. Qin Hao slowly raised his palms, and the endless red lotus demonic flames in his imperial body surged out. The sky turned into a sea of flames, and huge meteorites were condensed by the flames, hovering around his body. Countless meteorites spun wildly, and with Qin Hao as the center, they turned into a huge meteorite storm. Emperor Song Yao pointed forward, and the giant tablets that blotted out the sky fell with a rumble. Streams of cursed light fell into the flaming storm. Suddenly, there was a terrifying explosion in the void. Everyone was shocked to see that the giant monument kept exploding above the storm. Every time a piece fell, it was immediately shattered by the flying meteorites. The cursed radiance was also swallowed up by the tongues of fire. No matter how the sky-burying monument kept bombarding, the storm was still red and dazzling. In the Sky Shaker clan's army, the various emperors clenched their fists so tightly that their knuckles creaked. Their hearts trembled. Even this can't crush him? Since the day the emperor came of age, he has never met an opponent who can take 3 moves from him among his peers. Those who can take 2 moves are already considered geniuses. This person not only took the emperor's full strength head-on, but his Tao will is also not inferior. Today, the emperor has met the true opponent of his life. Not good. While everyone was watching the battle and discussing, one of the emperors noticed that the flaming storm was constantly approaching Song Yao's position. Although it moved very slowly, and the dense berry heaven tombstones fell like hailstones, blocking the view, the storm was indeed faintly approaching Song Yao. Denda's descendant. Does he still want to fight back? Emperor Song Yao naturally also noticed the approaching storm. In the middle of a battle, genius martial artists were very sensitive to every trace of danger. At this moment, his face was getting paler and paler, and blood was constantly flowing from the corners of his mouth. Previously, he was bombarded by the berry heaven tombstones and the meteorites Tao will, and his divine soul was shaken into cracks. This had indeed affected him greatly. Even though he kept releasing his Tao will, he couldn't stop the storm from approaching. Roar! Qin Hao's legs and ankles were pierced by 2 balls of Battle Emperor's golden light. The majestic power caused his thighs to feel as if they were filled with boiling blood. In an instant, his speed increased explosively and he escaped from the storm. He turned into an afterimage that even the emperors could not lock onto. He used the water wind steps to advance, directly charging towards Song Yao. His clenched fists were filled with the dazzling power of battle emperors. He had already opened 7 palaces. Rumble. An incomparably terrifying sound exploded crazily. 2 consecutive, shocking cries exploded in the void, causing even the deaf to be enlightened. The moment Qin Hao broke away from the storm, the flames behind him dissipated and an even more dazzling golden shadow appeared in front of Song Yao. It was as if a golden bell had descended, and in an instant, the golden bell collapsed and dissipated. A mouthful of blood sprayed out from Qin Hao's mouth as he was knocked flying away. He slid back 1,000 feet in midair, and his clothes were dyed red. At this moment, the heaven-burying will that had suppressed the heavens dissipated. The flames also disappeared at the same time. The sky above the mountain of the way gradually returned to normal. Countless pairs of shocked eyes looked over. In front of Emperor Song Yao stood another emperor. This figure's aura was even more vigorous. The golden-white emperor's light shone brightly. A total of 9 emperor's rings appeared under his feet. He was a perfected emperor, an emperor-level expert. Old man Taihua's expression was extremely ugly. 9 emperor's rings. This must be Emperor Han Tian of the Gui clan. He had come to the Shui Yao holy nation so openly. Did he completely disregard Emperor Han Tian of the Holy Palace? Countless people looked in front of Emperor Song Yao. Li Chuji had clearly been sent flying by this person. Despicable. Qin Hao steadied himself and gently wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He stared coldly in front of him. He had opened 7 palaces to fight Dilly. He wanted to take down Song Yao directly. However, the moment he got close, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He did not know what the other party had used, but it was extremely dangerous. It had forced the divine cauldron's vessel spirit to release the golden bell protection. If it weren't for the great void cauldron's vessel spirit, Qin Hao would have been seriously injured, even if he didn't die. The figure standing in front of Emperor Song Yao didn't look good either. At this moment, Emperor Han Tian of the Gui clan was looking at his palm with a bitter expression. He was holding a crystal-like, transparent thorn in his palm. It didn't look very sturdy, but in fact, it was sharper and more dangerous than the Grim Reaper's dagger. This thorn was called Emperor's Eternal Slumber. It was personally created by Mu Xinqiao, the Mu clan's Emperor Han Tian of the East Territory and Wei Wei's father. It was extracted from the heavenly iron collected from Penglai, Sakura Island. It was tempered for more than 100 years and was constantly tempered in the furnace. One could imagine how much heavenly iron was used to create this Emperor's eternal slumber, and how terrifyingly dense it was tempered to. For this reason, Mu Xinqiao named it Emperor's Eternal Slumber. It meant that when this Emperor artifact was used, even the strongest Emperor-level experts would fall. But today, the Emperor's Eternal Slumber that Emperor Han Tian had collected for 600 years was actually broken by Emperor Yuan, an 8th-stage Dao realm cultivator. One could imagine how heartbroken he was. It broke. Song Yao looked at his father in shock. Yeah, I didn't succeed. Emperor Han Tian sighed and looked at Qin Hao with a very complicated expression. When he was young, he once saw Dindi of Daqin and worshipped him. He regarded him as the supreme goal in his heart and wanted to surpass him. Even old ancestor Han Tian didn't have such an honor. Unfortunately, he was unable to fight against Dindi of Daqin in his life. Before he stepped into the Emperor realm, Dindi had already fallen. But he didn't expect that he would be lucky enough to meet Dinda's descendant today. Moreover, he failed the first time he attacked with the Emperor's Eternal Slumber. In the past, on Sunset Peak, Dinda stood at the top and looked down at the 100 emperors of the 4 regions and 8 wastelands. Although I don't know how strong he is, in terms of his aura, even my old ancestor can't compare to him. Emperor Han Tian looked at Qin Hao and said, "And you have perfectly inherited many of his lost techniques. In another 300 to 500 years, I'm afraid you will be the second Dendi. It's a pity. This praise was definitely not empty words. Emperor Han Tian saw the battle between Qin Hao and Song Yao. He had been hiding in Song Yao's storage ring. He thought that his son would successfully take down Song Yao today. But he never expected that in the last round of the collision of rules, Qin Hao used some kind of emperor technique. The fistlight was so shocking that he felt that Song Yao's life was seriously threatened. He had no choice but to take action. In the end, the Emperor Lord's eternal slumber stab was broken. Qin Hao didn't reply. Even though Emperor Han Tian was praising him sincerely, Qin Hao only looked at Yuan Shitao with disdain. A dignified Emperor Lord hiding in his storage ring and plotting against Yuan Shitao. How could such a person be worthy of being an Emperor Lord? You're quite proud and aloof, just like the Pill Emperor back in the day. Forget it. I'm too lazy to talk to you about this. Although you really want to hear about the glorious deeds of your ancestors, it's better to ask the Pill Emperor personally when you go to hell. Monarch Han Tian clawed at the void, and with a loud whistling sound, the two divine hammers that had fallen to the ground flew towards him. Monarch Han Tian held the hammers with both hands, and his palms glowed with monarch light. He leaped into the air and slammed the hammers onto Qin Hao's head. At the same time, Song Yao also made his move. The godly king halberd stabbed forward with a speed not slower than his father. One was at the 8th level of Dao corroboration and was regarded as the successor of ancestor Han Tian. The other was the clan lord of Han Tian. The father and son attacked Qin Hao at the same time. Shameless, Qian Ning stepped forward. Not only did they ambush her, they even joined forces. Elder Taihua's heaven-reaching vine blocked Qian Ning's path and shook his head helplessly. At this point, it was not appropriate for Empress Shuiyao to intervene. Li Chuji's identity was too special. If it were anyone else in the world, they wouldn't have allowed the Han Tian clan to do as they pleased in the Shuiyao Empire. Li Chuji was different. He was Denda's descendant. If they interfered in this battle, they would attract the sunset battle god, and the sacred palace would be in trouble. Moreover, Empress Shuiyao had comprehended her true self and was on the verge of a breakthrough. 10 years ago, when Qian Ning participated in the sacred palace omen, Empress Shuiyao went into seclusion. This was her second breakthrough, and she couldn't afford to fail again. Otherwise, how could she allow the Han Tian clan to be so arrogant? Could it be that he really can escape today? Qian Ning clenched her jade-like hands. Putting Muri aside, they had been in the same sect for 3 years. She had feelings for Qin Hao. He had saved her life and led everyone to escape from the sacred palace. He had fulfilled Grandma Taihua's prophecy and turned misfortune into blessing. However, today, she couldn't bear to see Qin Hao suffer. She was also a disciple of the sacred palace. Let's leave everything to fate, Elder Taihua said. After he finished speaking, he closed his eyes. The heaven-reaching vine in his hand flashed with green light. His spiritual soul seemed to have left his body and merged with the heavenly path, trying to spy on something. This is too shameless. Beating up Chu San is not taking the mountain of the way seriously. Don't stop me. I can't stand it anymore. Inside the mountain of the way, Shi Yongnian spat at Song Yao and his son in the sky. He rubbed his arms and wanted to join the battle. Zhan Bieqiu, Bo Shang, Elder Qi, and Elder Yu all looked at the battle seriously and ignored Shi Yongnian. Forget it. I'll listen to Chu San and protect the mountain of the way and Shi Dong. Shi Yongnian glanced at everyone secretly. Why didn't they stop him? It would be good to pretend and show the sex anger. In the void, Song Yao and Emperor Han Tian attacked together. Qin Hao showed a serious expression for the first time. Song Yao was nothing, but Yuan Shitao was not to be underestimated. After all, he was an Emperor Lord who had proven his way. Whoosh! A jade-like shadow appeared in his hand. The divine implement revealed its second battle form. It turned into a Taishu divine sword. On a sharp blade, there were traces of red lotus demonic flame. Just as the two closed in, Qin Hao threw his left hand forward. Suddenly, the empty palm of his hand bloomed with Emperor's light. A platinum emperor's silk lashed up like a long whip. It hit the air and hit Song Yao hard. The golden bell protection was broken. He couldn't afford to be careless in the following battle. Bang! The emperor's silk lashed out. It was an emperor's weapon made of jade. Its power was overbearing. It swept through the air like silk. Song Yao's broken divine armor was directly shattered. The faster the emperor's body rushed, the harder it fell. At this moment, there was finally a scream in the void. Chapter 1701. On the day they first arrived at the East Continent, Qin Hao and the others were ambushed on the Void battleship. Muri died, and the rest were severely injured by the Thunder Will and scattered across the 5 realms. The Imperial Rainbow Silk blocked most of the Will of Wei attacks for Qin Hao, but it was damaged and cracked. However, in these 10 years, Qin Hao had gradually repaired the Imperial Rainbow Silk while using the 5-spirit earthly chi of South Sky Peak to refine the Imperial Rainbow Silk. No matter how proud Emperor Song Yao was, he couldn't help but cry out in pain. Emperor Han Tian didn't care and let Song Yao fall. The pair of hammers in his hands pressed down like Mount Tai. The will of Wei affected the power of heaven and earth, causing the void to tremble violently. Qin Hao's 7-palace battle dilly flashed. As the hammers pressed down, the great void sword in his hand blocked it. The emperor weapons clashed, and dazzling sparks bloomed. Suddenly, a powerful force was transmitted, and Song Yao fell from the void crazily. Qin Hao clenched his teeth, and his right hand that was holding the sword was numb. Emperor Han Tian's strength was extremely strong, completely different from Song Yao's. The 9th level of Dao, proving perfection, was indeed extraordinary. Seeing this, Emperor Han Tian revealed a sinister smile. His body fell like a meteor, and his hammers were wrapped in turbulent emperor light. He didn't give Qin Hao a chance to catch his breath before he attacked again. Wings! Qin Hao shouted. A bright golden radiance spread out from his back, and the Sagittarius Temple battle armor materialized. The armor and scales outlined a well-proportioned body. The 12 wings shook in the air, and the falling momentum directly went against the momentum of the fall. After stepping into the Emperor's path, one could completely control the power of the Emperor weapons. The seal that Li Wanji cast before had been automatically dissolved. Except for the lack of a weapon spirit, it had now recovered the appearance of an Emperor weapon. You have many trump cards, but it's not enough. The Imperial Rainbow Silk, the Sagittarius Palace Battle Suit, the Great Void Sword, and every divine soldier armor on Qin Hao's body exuded the power of an Emperor weapon. Even so, Emperor Han Tian's expression didn't change. With incomparable confidence, the hammers in his hands collided again. Pong! Another terrifying muffled sound was heard, and the flames were even more intense than before. It was as if Qin Hao had been hit by a huge whale. Even though his battle suit had helped Qin Hao reduce some of the power, this hammer attack from Emperor Han Tian still continued to push him towards the ground. Monarch Lord Han Tian's physical strength and monarch intent far surpassed an ordinary monarch lord. As expected, the father is better at fighting than the son. Back then, Yuan Shitao was still in his swaddling clothes. Now, he is even stronger than Xin Yuan Gaoyan. Qin Hao's body plummeted downwards at a rapid speed, the sound of wind whistling past his ears. Not only was Yuan Shitao's cultivation high enough, he had also underestimated the pair of divine hammers in his hands. Although the pair of hammers had not reached the level of the divine soldier and could not compare to the Xinyuan halberd, they were not far off. At this time, Qin Hao guessed that the identity of Kuei Wei, who was easily killed by him, was probably not simple. He should be a general in the Heaven Shaker clan who guarded the Tharch artifact. He was similar to the personal guard of the Monarch Lord, and his cultivation was naturally extraordinary. It was just that Kuei Wei was too careless and underestimated his enemy. He had sent his head right in front of Qin Hao, a flawless monarch. Otherwise, Old Man Taiwa might not be a match for that person. In fact, his guess was right. Kuei Wei, or the Twin Hammers, had a much higher status in the Heaven Shaker clan than the other monarchs. However, in the current situation, if he didn't take out the complete power of the 9 palaces, it would be very difficult to compete with Yuan Shurtao. 9 Palaces War Emperor Art. Heart Palace, Heaven Spirit Palace. 2 golden lights burst out from Qin, housed the archbody. In the past 10 years, not only was the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon completely restored, but the last palace of the War Emperor Art was also perfectly opened by Qin Hao. Just like the Divine Palace's Mizar War Sovereign, when the 9 palaces were opened at the same time, the martial artist condensed the War God Dharma body, and Dili was greatly sublimated. At this moment, the power of the 9 palaces was fully unleashed. Majestic power filled his meridians, roaring like a primordial river. Qin Hao's body bloomed with extremely dazzling emperor light. An incomparably huge War God Dharma body descended and enveloped Qin Hao's body. His falling momentum suddenly stopped. He waved his hand and slashed the sword above his head. The huge War God Dharma body held an illusory sword of the War God. It also slashed the sword upward and slashed at the twin hammers of the Heaven Shaker clan. Clang! An incomparably violent collision sound came from the void. It was as if a giant was hammering iron, shaking the heads of all the emperors present. They all released their emperor will to prevent this force from invading their divine souls. Old Man Taiwa and the powerhouses of the Sacred Palace didn't hesitate to form an emperor light barrier to block this force for the Dao Mountain. Even so, the disciples of the various dojos in the Dao Mountain all fell to the ground. They covered their ears with their hands and looked at the battle in the sky in horror. Are they still mortals? It was comparable to a battle between gods. No wonder millions of corpses would fall when the emperor was angry. Not bad. In the sky, the Heaven Shaker clan's lord, Yuan Tao, was blasted back by the War God Dharma body. He climbed up hundreds of feet in a sorry state. He praised with admiration. Although you are only at the perfected Dao realm, the Dili you unleashed now is enough to compete with the Imperial Lord. Come again. As if he hadn't vented his desire for battle for hundreds of years, Yuan Tao's face became more and more excited. He raised the hammer with one hand, and the endless heaven burial turned into a terrifying whirlwind that lingered on the divine hammer. He pointed down, and the whirlwind struck out a gray lightning bolt. The boundless heaven burial Dao will carry the power of the curse and blasted down, wanting to bury Qin Hao in eternal sleep. Qin Hao looked up. Yuan Tao's strength was indeed extraordinary. As an unblemished emperor, even though he activated the 9 palaces' combat power and held the Great Void Sword, he still couldn't gain the upper hand. Other than Monk Huitong, this person was the second person he met who could be called a powerhouse after his rebirth. He was definitely stronger than Xianyuan Gaoyan. Qin Hao threw out the Imperial Rainbow Silk with his left hand and quickly stirred it toward the sky. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered crazily, condensing into an incomparably huge vortex. The 9 palaces fighting will merged into the War God Dharma body. With a loud roar, the War God Dharma body punched heavily toward the sky. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth stirred by the Imperial Rainbow Silk turned into a fist aura that was perfectly blasted by the War God Dharma body. Boom, crack, crack, crack. The heavens were destroyed, and terrifying cracks appeared in the space. The gray lightning of the curse pierced through the fist aura and entered the War God Dharma body. It tore apart the 9 palaces' power and hit Qin Hao. Qin Hao's body trembled slightly as the will of the Zongtian Emperor invaded his body and spirit. Blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. However, the fist aura also pierced through the lightning and crazily punched upward. Yuan Tao's expression changed slightly. The will of the Zongtian Emperor merged into the divine hammer and smashed forward crazily. However, his entire body was shaken and leaned backward. In an instant, his internal organs felt as if they were being burned by fire. Countless scarlet sparks appeared under his clothes, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. In this attack, The rules entered both of their bodies at the same time, and they were both injured. So powerful. Old man Taiwa finally opened his eyes again. His old face trembled, and he couldn't help but make a guess. If Shui Yao had fought with these two before she had an epiphany, would she have reached the same level? But thinking about it, it couldn't be that Li Chuji and Emperor Han Tian were stronger. Nie Sippo was so shocked that her face turned pale. Was this Li Chuji's true strength? If he had directly punched her 4 days ago, even 1,000 Nie Sippo would have been reduced to nothingness. Now, she suddenly woke up. At that time, Li Chuji's attitude was so humble. As he said, he wasn't afraid of the sacred palace or Nie Sippo. He was just giving face to Qianning. Do you understand the difference between you and him now? Qianning seemed to have sensed the change in Nie Sippo and said coldly. In fact, even she didn't expect Qin how to be so strong. He was on par with a perfected Dao, proving sovereign lord in the 8th stage Dao proving realm. Moreover, Emperor Han Tian's strength was much stronger than ordinary sovereign lords. It would be difficult for Qin how to win this battle. At the same time, his life wasn't in danger now. At least, he was qualified to fight against Emperor Han Tian. Amazing. You're stronger than I thought. The Emperor light around Yuan Shurtao weakened a little. He was using Emperor will to suppress the soul fire in his body. The soul fire was unusually strong. It felt like countless meteorites were hitting his internal organs. It was very uncomfortable. Qin Hao still didn't reply. The curse will in his body was corroding his flesh and divine soul. He was also suppressing it. However, his body was special. He was a demigod body formed by 10,000 spirits. His body contained the power of the evil fetus. In reality, he was much more relaxed than Yuan Shurtao. At least Emperor Will of Zhang Tian didn't destroy his sovereign body, let alone weaken his flawless sovereign soul. Ha! I didn't expect it to be so difficult to come to the Shui Yao Empire to capture a person. It's an honor for Fangya to die in your hands. It's a pity that you're going to lose this battle. Emperor Han Tian's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. Suddenly, the void changed. The Emperor will of Zhang Tian filled the sky. The Zhang Tian tablets appeared again. They were densely packed and stood in the void like a cemetery. Not only did they cover Qin Hao's head, but they also covered the entire mountain of Dao. Oh no! Qin Hao came to his senses. He had more than one opponent. He looked in one direction. In the distance, Emperor Cang Yao let go of the godly king halberd and raised his hands to support the sky. The Emperor will of Zhang Tian merged with the Great Path. His Zhang Tian rules grew stronger and stronger. His usually cold and emotionless face showed extreme hatred. He hated Qin Hao not because of Fangya's death, but because this person was obviously stronger than him. He was on par with his father, Emperor Han Tian. Emperor Han Tian, what are you doing? Seeing this scene, Elder Taiwa was also shocked. The Emperor will of Zhang Tian covered the entire Qilin mountain range. Their intention was obviously not to target Li Chuji alone. They were going to attack the Taoist sect. Bo Shang, activate the sect-protecting formation. All disciples enter the main peak. Down below, Zhang Bieqiu let out an inhuman scream. He never thought that as the leader of the Taoist sect, an 8-foot man, one day he would scream louder than a woman. At the same time, Bo Shang infused the power of Ren Huang into the matrix base, and the newly repaired Great Protective Matrix quickly rose into the air, turning into a huge eggshell that covered the main peak. Batch after batch of disciples scrambled to gather at the main peak from various training halls. Fortunately, they had the foresight to begin repairing the Matrix base not long after the battle broke out. Time was tight, and even though it was not completely repaired, it was still somewhat comforting. They saw that the Matrix had even blocked Great Elder Qigong. In the face of Emperor Cang Yao, who was 100 times stronger than Great Elder Qigong, this little bit of comfort collapsed with one blow. How dare you? Qin Hao roared, responding to the father and son with anger for the first time. If they wanted to capture him, then so be it. Why did they want to kill the innocent disciples of the Mountain of the Way? You can only blame yourself for being stubborn. You're too stubborn, too stubborn. Even my father can't do anything to you. Now, I'll give you a chance. Surrender and come back with us obediently. Otherwise, I'll destroy every blade of grass and tree in the mountain. Emperor Song Yao's face was extremely fierce. He had never lost to anyone in the same realm. However, after the battle, he found that the gap between him and Qin Hao was getting bigger and bigger. In the end, he was sent flying with a blow and lost the right to intervene. He hated Yi Futian, so he wanted to destroy everything. Chapter 1702. Because he was weaker, he hated him. Because he couldn't take down Denda's descendant, he could only resort to this unconventional method. No matter who won in the end, even if he could defeat Qin Hao, Heavenly Monarch Lord Han Tian would have to pay a heavy price. Therefore, it was best for the father and son to threaten him with the lives of thousands of people in Dao Mountain. Doing so would naturally damage the reputation of the Heavenly Monarch and anger Heavenly Monarch Shui Yao. However, they didn't care. Even if Qin Hao didn't give in, his Dao heart would be affected if he saw thousands of people die because of him. When a cultivator went crazy, he would have more flaws and he would be defeated faster. To Song Yao and his son, the people in the mountain were just ants. Heavenly Monarch Shui Yao wouldn't go to the extent of starting a war with the Heavenly Monarch of the East Sea over some insignificant ants. After all, neither side could afford to pay the price of a war. Choose. Either you destroy your Dao body and return to the East Sea with us, or you fight to the end with the dignity of Denda's descendant. Everyone in the mountain will die because of you. Song Yao's ruthless words pierced Qin Hao's heart. There were two choices in front of him. One was to destroy his Dao body and go to the East Sea, leaving his fate in the hands of the enemy. The other was that if he didn't give in, Dao Mountain would face the same fate as Qin Hao. He couldn't afford to pay this debt. Qin Hao's mind was in turmoil, and the hand holding the sword trembled slightly. He stared at Heavenly Monarch Song Yao and Heavenly Monarch Lord Han Tian. If the father and son worked together, they could break through his defense and destroy everything in Dao Mountain. Qilin Dao Sect was the ancestral land of Eastern Sky's senior brother and senior brother Shermu. The people in the mountain were their clansmen. The space fell into silence. More and more giant sky-burying tablets gathered in the void. Under the Emperor's will, Heavenly Monarch Song Yao could turn the 15 counties of Nanjiang into nothingness. All eyes were on Qin Hao. Everyone was waiting for his decision. Qin Hao slowly turned around and looked inside the Dao Mountain. He saw Ji Bieqiu and the others shaking their heads at him, as if telling him not to worry about anything. At this moment, a hint of guilt flashed in Qin Hao's eyes. Not only did he not take care of the Dao sect on behalf of his senior sister, but he had also implicated them and caused them to face a calamity. Qin Hao slowly loosened his grip and made his choice. The imperial rainbow silk slowly floated down and landed in the air above the mountain of the way. The Emperor's power contained in it activated the might of the Emperor's armament. The imperial rainbow silk suddenly shone brightly and radiated a platinum brilliance. Accompanied by the roar of a dragon, it seemed to have turned into a huge dragon that circled around the mountain of the way, firmly protecting it. Let's fight! Qin Hao pointed his great void sword at Emperor Song Yao. His life was right here. Come and take it if you can. Emperor Song Yao glanced coldly at the ground below. An emperor weapon to protect the mountain? Without the monarch continuously instilling Dili with his heaven-burying Dao will, how much of his heaven-burying Dao could a single imperial sash block? What a pity! Destroy the mountain and leave no one alive. Emperor Song Yao spat out a murderous roar. In his palms, the heaven-burying Dao blasted down with all his might. Pieces of heaven-burying tombstones contained the terrifying power of the rules. They streaked across the sky and fell from the void like a rainstorm covering the Qilin mountain range. At the same time, the Sky Shaker clan's army that stood in the void pressed down. Emperor Song Yao, you have gone too far. Emperors of the sacred palace, stop them with me. Old Man Taiwa let out an angry roar. After all, the Dao Mountain was under the protection of Empress Shui Yao. If they did not act now, the sacred palace would lose its dignity. Waves of Emperor Qi bloomed. Qian Ning, Nie Sipo, and many emperors of the sacred palace moved to intercept the Sky Shaker clan's army and the falling heaven-burying tombstones. However, all of this was within Emperor Song Yao's calculations. He had never thought of destroying the Dao Mountain with just the heaven-burying Dao will. The people of the sacred palace naturally would not allow it. At this moment, the emperors of the Sky Shaker clan moved at the same time. Waves of platinum light with smiles on their faces intercepted the emperors of the sacred palace. They would not fight to the death with the emperors of the sacred palace. They only needed to slightly block them because this group of women was not to be trifled with. They had an imperial lord behind them. As long as they blocked them, the army behind them would be enough to massacre everything in the mountain. Woo-woo. In the haze, an ethereal and majestic sound came from the ancient Dao Mountain. In this battlefield where fire and water were incompatible, it clearly passed into everyone's mind. Qin Hao, Emperor Song Yao, and even Emperor Song Yao heard it clearly. It was like a warning. Unfortunately, no one cared about the faint warning given by the Dao Mountain. Both sides had no choice but to act. Countless heaven-burying tombstones continued to fall from the sky. The emperors of the sacred palace fought with the emperors of the Sky Shaker clan furiously. Even the people of the Array Formation Guild, who accompanied Face like Cream, also joined the battle. As soon as they met, Emperor Yuan of the Array Formation Guild was beaten up by one of the emperors of the Sky Shaker clan. He vomited blood and fled in a sorry state. He didn't even care about the life and death of Yin Laobei's daughter. In this situation, even Emperor Yuan would fall. Who wouldn't cherish their own life? The battle in the void continued. The Imperial Rainbow Ribbon was like a giant dragon entrenched on the Dao Mountain. The heaven-burying tombstones fell like a rainstorm, bombarding the dragon's body. The light emitted by the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon became dimmer and dimmer, and its size became smaller and smaller. Just as Emperor Song Yao predicted, an Empyrean weapon that had lost its master was just a weapon. Its role was limited. The defensive line formed by the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon would be broken sooner or later. It couldn't stop the attacks at all. Boom, boom, boom. Bursts of rumbling sounds continuously came from the hands of Qin Hao and Emperor Song Yao. He wanted to return to protect the Qilin Dao sect, but he was entangled by Emperor Song Yao. Yuan Shitao's strength was very strong. There was indeed a slight gap between the 8th stage of Dao validation and the perfected stage of Dao validation. Even if Qin Hao cultivated to the flawless Empyrean realm, he couldn't be distracted while fighting with Emperor Song Yao. Finally, as the overwhelming heaven-burying tombstones smashed down, the giant dragon transformed from the Imperial Rainbow Ribbon let out a sad cry and exploded. Amidst the smoke and dust, a ribbon with dim Empyrean light returned to its original state and fell powerlessly into the Dao Mountain. The defensive line was broken. Tai Hua and the others were blocked by Emperor Yuan of the Heavenly Shaker clan. There was no longer any protection in front of the Qilin Dao sect. There was only a Rinhuang level sect protection array formation left. And this array formation was instantly destroyed by the fall of a heaven-burying tombstone. Zhang Bieqiu, Shi Yongnian, and Bo Shang let out a tragic roar, desperately trying to resist. The moment the array formation exploded, the heaven-burying tombstone directly blasted into their bodies. They vomited blood all the way and fell into the main peaks hall. The hall that had just been repaired collapsed again. Qin Hao noticed that the three of them were under the attack of Song Yao's Dao. How could a mere Empyrean resist? It was hard to say whether they would survive this blow. But above the void, the heaven-burying tombstone was still falling. There was a sickly smile on Song Yao's face, as if he had finally won once. Next, he would slowly appreciate it. The more powerless Qin Hao was, the happier he was. Looking at the disciples below, struggling, panicking, and screaming all over the mountain, it was really satisfying. I want your entire Heavenly Shaker clan to be buried with me. Dense dragon scales quickly covered his arms. The dragon's soul in his body roared, and his bones made cracking sounds as they grew. Qin Hao's imperial body became more and more majestic. His back, chest, limbs, and half of his face were covered with scales. Set off by the battle suit, it was as if he was wearing a second armor, the dragon armor. Finally, when he raised his dragon claw that transformed into a ferocious dragon claw, the great void sword in his hand slashed down heavily. An incomparably majestic force blasted out. The flaming sword light directly cut open the divine hammer of Heavenly Shaker Lord. This emperor weapon that was close to the supreme divine soldier was split into two. Blood spurted out from Heavenly Shaker Lord's face. Incomparably shrill screams echoed in the void. Chapter 17:03. An unblemished emperor had both souls and the battle body of the Nine-Palace War Emperor. He used a meteorite rule to split the sword apart. Heavenly Monarch Hantian's body retreated frantically. The sword wound on his face was extremely eye-catching. Blood flowed out from the wound. If he hadn't dodged in time, that sword might have cut off his head. His heart was pounding violently, and his eyes were filled with shock. He could clearly sense that Qin Hao's dilly was no weaker than his. It had truly surpassed the standard of an ordinary emperor and was enough to compete with him. If they fought again, it would be very difficult to predict who would emerge victorious. Qin Hao didn't continue to pursue after forcing Yuan Shitao to retreat. Anger didn't make him lose his mind. He knew very well what he needed to do now. He had wanted to keep his Dharma form as a trump card. Being trapped in the East Continent, he had to have a backup plan. However, if he didn't release his Dharma form, he wouldn't be able to save the sect on his own. The will of the Emperor communicated with the dragon spirit, and the Emperor light around Qin Hao's body became even more violent. Another terrifying power seemed to be awakening in his body, ready to burst out at any moment. Just as he released his Dharma form, a layer of dazzling light suddenly swept out from the top of the mountain of the way, where the formation light had collapsed. A figure let out a cry, clenching the imperial rainbow silk with both hands. He gritted his teeth and madly infused the imperial rainbow silk into it. The dim emperor weapon glowed brightly again, and the platinum light rose up like a heavenly canopy, propping up a fragile line of defense, barely withstanding the remaining will of the Tsungyao Emperor's heaven burial will. It's him? Qin Hao looked at the figure in disbelief. As the scattered heaven burial tablets shattered on the imperial rainbow ribbon, the layer of sweeping emperor light disappeared in a flash. It was faster than a meteor streaking across the sky. Even so, the power unleashed by the emperor weapon in that short instant had completely drained that person's cultivation in life. Jinhua, my grandson, in the Path Mountain, Elder Qi, who was holding Sherdong in his hand, looked at the figure standing above. Two streams of tears flowed down his old eyes. Who would have thought that when the fate of the three sect masters was unknown and the sect was on the brink of destruction, Shi Jinhua, who had been punished to guard the tomb at the back of the mountain due to his heresy, would run out to receive the Tao will of Emperor Tsungyao on behalf of the Tao Mountain. At this moment, Shi Jinhua's appearance was extremely terrifying. His skin was ghastly pale like paper, numerous shattered cracks covered his face, and there wasn't the slightest aura on his body. He was like a stone statue that had suddenly been struck by a heavy hammer, and the slightest touch would cause him to transform into powder. His expression was flustered and his eyes were filled with fear. Perhaps even he himself did not know why he dared to face Emperor Tsungyao head-on. His mind was blank, and he looked like he was in pain at the last second when the laws entered his body. "Are you crazy?" Qin Hao roared. A mere lower-level Yuan Venerate had actually dared to forcibly activate a Dharch weapon. The Monarch Rainbow Silk did not even have the slightest restriction. "I want to do something for the Tao sect." Before Shi Jinhua could finish his sentence, his body turned into ashes and dissipated in the wind. The power of the arch weapon had instantly erupted and devoured everything. He had probably not even been able to shine for a second. However, in less than a second, he had propped up the entire Dao Mountain. Even Emperor Tsang Yao had not expected this outcome. Old Qi watched as Shi Jinhua turned into ashes without leaving behind a trace of his soul. He couldn't help but recall a scene from the past. At the time, Shi Jinhua had still been a child. "Grandfather, when I grow up, I want to become a hero of the Dao sect and be as strong as the 3 sect masters. Do you think I can do it?" It was a very simple wish. Could it be fulfilled? Yes, you did it. You did it. Old Qi choked with sobs. Perhaps Shi Jinhua's character had many shortcomings, but he had never forgotten his original intention. For the sake of that simple dream, he had sacrificed his life. He had been like a moth flying into a flame, a heroic sacrifice. Qin Hao was silent. No matter how much resentment he had with Shi Jinhua, it had dissipated the moment Shi Jinhua had turned into ashes. Shi Jinhua was extremely vain, but he was not capable enough. He looked down on others, and his heart was bigger than the sky. However, one had to admit that he was worthy of being called a hero at the end of his life. The endless sky burying tombstones had completely disappeared. There was not a single piece left in the void. All of them had been blocked by the imperial rainbow silk. The scattered tombstones had also been shouldered by Shi Jinhua alone the moment he stepped forward. Emperor Tsang Yao spat out a mouthful of blood. He had expended too much energy and had also paid a hefty price for using the ultimate nomological intent for the second time. However, the pace of the Sky Shaker race's army did not stop because of this. Tens of thousands of troops obeyed the order and formed a battle formation before descending on the Dao Mountain. The fastest leaders were more than 10 peak human rulers. The entire army was composed of high-level Yuan venerates. They were the elites of the Ji race's direct line of descent. There was no longer any obstruction in front of them. Chapter 1704. The Dao Mountain had a spirit, and the Dao ancestor was buried in it, protecting the peace of the Dao Mountain for generations. This was a legend passed down in the Qilan Dao sect since ancient times. Whether the Dao ancestor really existed or not, no one had ever seen it. And at this moment, the legend had become a living reality. Pairs of horrified eyes looked at the sky. The immortal standing in the air above the Dao Mountain was incomparably magnificent. He stood alone, dominating the crowd. The Dao ancestor's aura quickly recovered as he woke up from his slumber. It became more and more vast and boundless, as if it had merged into one with the great Dao. He was the source of the Dao will, and the power-suppressing Emperor Yuan became more and more obvious. Even people as strong as Qin Hao and Emperor Han Tian also felt a suffocating suppression. At this moment, the middle-aged man looked back at the Dao Mountain. His gaze fell on the crying Shi Ichi, and he said faintly, "The moment that young man held the Dharch artifact, he was destined to die. I can't reverse it." His soul was attached to the main peak, and he could resolve the falling heaven burial Dao will for Jiu Biechio and the others. But he couldn't save Shi Jinhua's life. I know. Shi Ichi's body lay on the ground, facing the sky as if he was worshipping a god. Not only Shi Ichi, but all the elders, deacons, and thousands of disciples of the Dao sect also knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the ancestor in their hearts. The descendants of the Gue clan, the Shi clan, and the Bo clan, who hadn't seen the portrait of the Dao ancestor before. The portrait had always been hung at the highest position in the Dao palace, and every year during the ancestral worship ceremony, the disciples would also pay homage to it. The person in the portrait was exactly the same as the one in front of them. The space became silent, and the chaotic battle stopped in an instant. No one dared to move. The heart of Emperor Han Tian, Shi Tao, was beating so violently that it was about to jump out of his chest. He couldn't suppress it at all. The Dao emitted by the other party was even more tyrannical than old ancestor Han Tian's. He naturally knew what it meant. This was a terrifying existence that surpassed the Imperial Lords. He looked extremely respectful and carefully said, "Senior, how should I address you?" "Evergreen is here," informed the ancient Dao sect and Bo Changji. The middle-aged man said indifferently. His eyes narrowed slightly as he locked on his shirt Tao's divine soul. Dong. Sure Tao felt like his heart was about to burst, and his scalp went numb. His facial features were exaggerated as if he had seen a ghost. Even though the Hantian clan dominated the East Sea and wasn't a force in the South, who in the Five Realms didn't know of the Dao ancestor Bo Changji was a powerhouse. Who in the Five Realms? Sect. At the top, Feng Dong, Shi Mu, and Bo Changji sat side by side. Bo Changji shook his head and sighed. "You are Ah Dong and Shi Mu's junior brother. They followed you home." Qin Hao was stunned at first. Then, his eyes became a little wet. He said, "Senior, are you also a fortune seer like Grandma Taiwa? Her Taoist power is limited. At most, she can see the surface. She can't see the truth of the heavenly way. I can know where you are at a glance." Bo Changji smiled. Fortune seizing was a heaven-defying act. Those who had this ability couldn't live for long. He was the same. That was why he entered a state of suspended animation to prolong his life. He wanted to wait for Shi Dong and Shi Mu. Until today, when the Dihong silk appeared, Bo Changji finally believed that Eastern Sky and Shi Mu had returned. He had finally endured until the moment when the three of them were together. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.